Buongiorno a tutti, solo per avvisare che cominciamo con un po' di ritardo perché il maltempo ha fatto sì che le persone non siano ancora arrivate. Abbiamo molti iscritti, quindi attendiamo ancora 2 minuti, dopo cominciamo. Grazie. Good morning, buongiorno. Grazie per essere qui. Diamo inizio adesso a questa manifestazione. Prima di introdurre gli ospiti, volevo dire che anche un giorno speciale, avete sentito venendo qui il vento di scirocco. Il vento di scirocco ha spostato le acque dell'Adriatico. In mare abbiamo 115 centimetri di livello di marea. Qui invece in città 90, perché oggi è la 116esima volta che le barriere del Mose sono chiuse. Quindi iniziamo questo evento con questo titolo, con questa consapevolezza che questo evento è possibile. Siamo arrivati qui senza metterci gli stivaloni, con i mezzi pubblici che funzionavano, solo grazie all'infrastruttura che per 116 volte dal 3 ottobre del 2020 ha difeso Venezia. È con grande piacere che do il benvenuto a casa sua al presidente della Biennale di Venezia, Pietrangelo Buttafuoco. Grazie Presidente.
Grazie. Talete, Anassimandro, Anassimene ed Eraclito, o Eraclito che dir si voglia, a seconda che si scelga la pronunzia, se latina o greca. Sono i fondamenti di quel che l'espressione greca, physis, accompagna la consapevolezza non soltanto teoretica ma scientifica per l'appunto, che accompagna la storia dell'umanità nell'intero globo rispetto al rapporto con gli elementi e physis, philei cryptestai, ovvero la natura ama nascondersi, trova in questa città il suo inverarsi, non fosse altro appunto perché una infrastruttura nascosta accoglie l'energia e la suggestione potente del dominio degli elementi proprio in questa città, rappresentando un paradigma preciso su cui la sostenibilità accolta qui in biennale nel lavoro straordinario che è stato fatto, nel Mose, sto parlando di questo convitato, ancor più che di pietra, frutto di genio e ingegno, offre un modello, un paradigma, attraverso il quale possiamo ben dire che una estenuante logora retorica è stata cancellata. Salvare Venezia è Venezia che salva gli altri. Ne sono assolutamente entusiasta del lavoro fatto. Non tocca a me dire i numeri straordinari che accompagnano la consapevolezza dei visitatori dalla città, dall'Italia e dal mondo intero. Saluto qui tutti quelli che da tutto il mondo sono venuti oggi a Venezia e mi sia consentito, voglio aprire come al solito un qualcosa che va oltre il mio ruolo istituzionale e quindi vesto i panni amicali di gratitudine a Renato Brunetta, che per me rappresenta il genius loci di questa città. Lo ripeto e lo dirò sempre. La prima cosa che ho fatto quando mi è stato dato l'incarico di venire qui a Venezia è stato fare una telefonata a Renato Brunetta e immediatamente un incontro con lui, perché ritengo che tutto trova luogo, dimora nel sentimento consapevole e partecipe di un qualcosa che non è soltanto cervello, è anche cuore. La passione profonda, l'amore nei confronti della ricerca e della scienza che ci riporta ancora una volta nei banchi del ginnasio. E quindi Talete, Anassimandro, Anassimene, Eraclito, Defeso, gli elementi quali l'acqua, di cui è partecipe nella sua essenza questa città, per restituirla al mondo attraverso la dialettica, la dinamica, la potente creazione di energia che si trafonde in tutti gli elementi, puro fuoco, estesa terra, e quindi nello pneuma contenere il genio e l'ingegno di un'idea di architettura che è ancora una volta la capacità di affidare a ognuno di noi i luoghi dell'abitare. Buon lavoro e grazie.
Che bel discorso, Presidente. Grazie molte, grazie molte, un bellissimo discorso, non potevamo iniziare meglio. Abbiamo anche l'altro padrone di casa, la Marina Militare, attraverso l'ammiraglio Guglielmi che è qui con noi, che anche lui ci dirà un breve indirizzo di saluto. Io ho sbagliato.
Sì, buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti anche da parte mia, è un vero piacere essere qui. Saluto quindi il padrone di casa Pierangelo Buttafuoco. Questo è un pezzo di arsenale che ormai è stato ceduto alla città e quindi impiegato oggi con grandissima soddisfazione della comunità cittadina, ma direi internazionale, da parte della Biennale. Grazie professor Brunetta, Presidente della Fondazione Venezia Capitale Mondiale della Sostenibilità, per avermi invitato. Saluto il Prefetto e tutti i gentili ospiti. La Marina Militare segue con attenzione, permettetemi di dire, molto vicina alle iniziative della Biennale e della Fondazione VSF. Sono iniziative molto importanti, direi per la città, ma è limitativo dire per la città perché sono iniziative che hanno una portata sicuramente internazionale e che ripropongono un po' quello che fu il modello di Venezia, di esportazione, no? Di porsi come figura di riferimento in tutto il Mediterraneo nell'epoca della Serenissima. L'argomento che viene discusso oggi, quindi la resilienza delle città costiere, è di grande interesse anche per il Ministero della Difesa, perché soprattutto per chi, come noi della Marina Militare, vive sul mare. Noi ogni giorno la Marina Militare, quella italiana, così come quella degli altri paesi, è impegnata nella difesa della libertà di navigazione, nel garantire a chi lavora sul mare legalmente che possa farlo in sicurezza, nel sostenere lo sviluppo della blue economy, nel proteggere le infrastrutture critiche, compreso quelle sommerse. Qui a Venezia, quindi, la Marina ha stabilito il suo polo culturale. Io sono il comandante dell'Istituto di Studi Militari Marittimi, di Italian Naval Staff College, which I have the privilege to command. È una bella realtà che sviluppa formazione per i nostri ufficiali, formazione di livello superiore, insieme all'Università di Venezia, Ca' Foscari in primis, ma anche UAV, e poi con l'Istituto di Scienze Marine del CNR. Questa sinergia, questa collaborazione, del resto è pienamente in linea con la vision della città. Vorrei citare quindi uno dei progetti della Fondazione, Venice City Campus. Anche la Marina, venendo qui con la sua formazione, quindi si muove in questa direzione. È evidente come l'Italia è un paese a profonda vocazione marittima e quindi il mare per lei riveste una importanza fondamentale dal punto di vista geopolitico, strategico, economico e ambientale. Su scala globale il mare copre più del 70% della superficie terrestre e ha un valore, il mare è un global common, ha un valore intrinseco ed estrinseco. Il valore estrinseco, che è quello che noi della difesa mettiamo in primo piano, è la sua capacità di operare come luogo di connessione. Quindi si pensi ai trasporti marittimi, alle infrastrutture marittime, quindi alle condotte di gas, ai cavi sottomarini che trasportano energia dati, il 98% dei dati viaggia su cavi sottomarini. Ma in prospettiva questo Global Common ci riserverà probabilmente altri ambiti, perché nel tentativo, quindi nella ricerca di produrre, di compiere una ordinata transizione ecologica, nel mare c'è la possibilità di avere ulteriori forme di produzione di energia verde, quindi pensiamo alle piattaforme eoliche offshore o quando ci riusciremo, io spero presto, alla possibilità di catturare l'energia delle maree. In questo contesto, quindi il tema che oggi affrontate è molto sensibile. Bisogna anche considerare che molti stati, anche quelli con scarsa tradizione marittima, si stanno attrezzando per sfruttare il mare, affacciarsi sul mare. E il sistema di norme convenzionali che abbiamo oggi, che è la United Nations Convention Law of the Sea, che fu approvata nel 1982, fa fatica a tenere il passo con l'evoluzione dei tempi e oggigiorno ci sono chiari segnali per cui questa norma convenzionale non è in grado di garantire una effettiva governance degli spazi marittimi. Quindi il tema che state discutendo oggi è molto importante. Stiamo parlando di resilienza della costa, ma consideriamo dal nostro punto di vista quali possono essere gli effetti, gli squilibri se non riusciamo a equilibrare, a controllare il cambiamento climatico e l'innalzamento del mare. Quasi sicuramente, oltre alla perdita di territorio, di patrimonio economico e culturale, quasi certamente ne deriverebbero anche degli squilibri sociali ed economici che portano direttamente, ahimè, a potenziali rischi per la sicurezza. E questo vale sia su scala nazionale, ma ancor di più su scala internazionale, nel momento in cui potrebbero verificarsi quindi nuovi contenziosi per territorializzare gli spazi marittimi, ne sappiamo qualcosa nel Mediterraneo, con mare molto ristretto, così come contenziosi per accedere alle risorse marittime. Ecco, quindi voi esperti oggi sarete chiamati a discutere un tema molto complesso che va studiato approfonditamente in forma multidisciplinare, che richiede l'intervento successivamente di tutte le istituzioni, delle forze migliori che i nostri paesi potranno mettere in campo per acquisire e mantenere una chiara consapevolezza della situazione, ma anche avere vision, trovare soluzioni per governare il rischio che ci si prospetta davanti e cercare di mantenere il vantaggio strategico dell'innovazione e dell'iniziativa. Detto questo, vi auguro di cuore buon lavoro, grazie per la vostra attenzione. Thank you for your attention. I wish you a most fruitful conference. My warmest welcome again to distinguished authorities and esteemed guests coming from international countries. Thank you.
Grazie molte. Grazie molte. Anch'esso un intervento di spessore, cibo per il pensiero, perché qui è necessario anche pensare. Questo evento è stato fatto in collaborazione con un importante ufficio delle Nazioni Unite, l'ufficio per la riduzione dei rischi di disastro. Avremo poi la possibilità di sentire il capo dell'ufficio europeo, che è qui presente e interverrà successivamente, ma il speciale rappresentante del segretario generale delle Nazioni Unite è un signore che sta a Ginevra per ruolo, e dove sta la sede del UNDRR. Purtroppo non è potuto venire con noi, sarà in città in settimana, non poteva esserci di lunedì e anche di venerdì. Però Kamal Kishore, che è appunto l'inviato speciale del segretario generale delle Nazioni Unite per la riduzione dei rischi di disastro, ci ha mandato un messaggio che vale la pena ascoltare. Anche questo è cibo per la mente. Sentiamo il messaggio di Kamal Kishore.
Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to join you for the third Biennale of Sustainability in Venice. Let me begin by thanking the Venice Foundation for Sustainable Capital for organizing this important event with the leadership and support of the City of Venice. The theme of this event, Coastal Cities, Climate Resilience, and Cultural Heritage Preservation, is relevant to many cities where historical and cultural landmarks are increasingly threatened by disasters. Over the last 30 years, I have seen time and again how damage to cultural heritage sites strikes at the heart of community identity and way of life, obscuring collective memory while also leading to loss of livelihoods. But exposure and vulnerability do not equate to inevitability. Disaster risk reduction is based on the principle that much can be done to prevent hazards from becoming disasters. Venice stands as a powerful example of this. For centuries, this city has adapted to the rhythm of the sea, and even in the face of sea level rise, it is showing the world how history, science, and community can come together to protect what is most precious. That is why we are proud to recognize Venice as a resilience hub within the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative, and to count the Venice Sustainability Foundation as a valued partner. The leadership shown by Venice exemplifies how the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction can be implemented effectively at the local level. In welcoming this Biennale, I would like to highlight 4 points. First, protecting cultural heritage is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Cultural heritage sites are monuments to history, human history, and their loss means losing part of who we are. Therefore, protecting these sites from disasters is not merely sentimental, it is existential. Second, resilience begins in cities. Local governments are on the front lines of risk, but also best placed to reduce it. They have the power and responsibility to plan, invest, and engage communities to build resilience for all. MCR 2030 exists to support cities' progress along a path of resilience, and we invite all cities to join it. Third, efforts must be guided by an understanding of risks. As a society, we measure what we value. Hence, if we value protecting cultural heritage sites, we must assess their levels of risk and track how they are impacted by disasters. The Sendai Framework Monitor, which is an online system maintained by UNDRR for countries to submit their official data, includes a specific indicator for tracking disaster-related economic loss to cultural heritage sites, even if the true cost goes far beyond economic terms. Fourth, collaboration is key. Cities often need support from national authorities to reach their full resilience potential. At the same time, cities can learn a great deal from one another, especially those facing similar risks, but such as sea level rise. This Biennale offers a valuable space for coastal cities to exchange experiences, forge partnerships, and co-create solutions that work, from engineering innovations to community engagement and cultural stewardship. In closing, I commend the City of Venice and all partners involved in this Biennale for turning the challenge of sea level rise into an opportunity to advance resilience for all. Your work inspires the world and reminds us that resilience is not only about protecting physical structures, it is about preserving the spirit of place and the story of people. Let us build on this legacy and the spirit of innovation that has shaped Venice to help all cities across the world achieve a more sustainable and resilient future. Thank you. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted.
Applausi. Applausi perché è stato anch'esso un discorso molto interessante e inspirational, come diceva per noi, no? E Venezia è stata inspirational per molte persone lungo tutta la sua storia. Con grande piacere chiedo al professor Renato Brunetta di intervenire. Il professor Renato Brunetta non ha bisogno di presentazioni, comunque è qui soprattutto per la sua presidenza della Fondazione VSF, la Fondazione Venezia Capitale Mondiale della Sostenibilità. Quindi il professor Buttafuoco prima lo ha introdotto, è effettivamente stata l'anima, l'ideatore e l'anima di questa iniziativa. Grazie Renato.
Grazie a tutti voi. Ma la cosa più concreta, l'ha detta prima l'ingegner Campostrini, se siamo qui senza stivali è perché si è alzato. Non si è chiuso, si è alzato il Mose ed è la 116ª volta dal 2020. Il Mose è un'opera dell'ingegneria italica, dell'ingegneria veneta, dell'ingegneria veneziana, delle università, finanziata dallo Stato, totalmente dallo Stato, senza brevetti. E il nostro sogno, Pietrangelo Buttafuoco, straordinario presidente della Biennale, il nostro sogno è quello di regalare i brevetti, di regalare l'idea, di regalare l'ingegno di quest'opera al mondo. Meglio di così non si potrebbe. E tutta questa nostra attività ormai da anni, grazie alla Fondazione Biennale, noi la indirizziamo proprio a questo obiettivo: mettere a disposizione del mondo l'enorme investimento che è stato fatto dallo Stato italiano, dalla cultura italiana, dalla cultura accademica, dalla cultura scientifica veneziana, veneta e italiana, quest'opera, per dire che di fronte alla resilienza cercata c'è una strada. Ce ne sono tante molto probabilmente, perché una laguna non è il mare, perché Venezia è in una laguna, in un mare tutto sommato amichevole, che è l'Adriatico. Il resto del mondo è molto più complicato e molto più complesso, però di questo si deve necessariamente parlare, perché non è troppo lontano. E adesso cercherò di spiegare perché. Caro Presidente Buttafuoco, caro Pietrangelo, grazie sempre per le belle parole, in parte immeritate ovviamente. La tua umiltà, quando ti sei occupato di Venezia, la dice lunga sulla tua sensibilità, sulla tua intelligenza. Stai costruendo una biennale non di pochi, ma di tanti, aperta al mondo, e questa è la cosa più bella. Caro Pietrangelo, spettabili autorità, autorevoli relatori, cari colleghi, 2 anni fa lanciammo con la Fondazione La Biennale di Venezia l'idea di affiancare al percorso della Biennale Architettura un'iniziativa con la stessa cadenza temporale dedicata al tema della sostenibilità, che chiamammo appunto Biennale della Sostenibilità. L'idea veramente è venuta al sindaco Brugnaro, che io cito qui anche se non è presente, ma l'idea fu del sindaco Brugnaro, una Biennale della Sostenibilità, senza tanta forma, senza tanta formalizzazione. E così abbiamo fatto. Da allora abbiamo costruito eventi dentro la Biennale, con il marchio della Biennale, ma che erano finalizzati alla nostra cultura della fondazione che presiedo della sostenibilità. Quella prima edizione fu un successo una serie di 12-13 eventi costruiti proprio per dare alla Biennale Architettura anche la dimensione della sostenibilità. Ma abbiamo fatto questa volta qualcosa di più. Grazie appunto a Pietrangelo Buttafuoco abbiamo riempito un padiglione della Biennale dentro un progetto speciale per raccontare l'intelligenza della comunità veneziana in 1600 anni di vita. Mai era successo che dentro la Biennale raccontasse la città di Venezia dove è ospitata. Ha raccontato i veneziani, certamente gli artisti, ha raccontato il mondo, certamente gli architetti, gli artisti e così via, ma non aveva mai raccontato se stessa, ma non con i propri pittori, con i propri architetti, con i propri scienziati, eppure ne ha avuti tantissimi, ma ha raccontato la sua comunità, la sua civitas. Venezia è conosciuta per la sua urbs, per le sue mura, per i suoi monumenti, per il suo ambiente, per la sua fisicità. Ma Venezia è anche civitas, cioè la sua gente. E non la gente famosa, ma la gente che ha costruito attraverso un'intelligenza millenaria un modello di città che non poteva esistere. Vedete, è stata un'esperienza bellissima questa del padiglione alla Biennale, che vedremo oggi pomeriggio insieme, che ha ospitato circa 110.000 visitatori. Ma la cosa che mi hanno raccontato, fin dal primo giorno, è che questi visitatori entravano in questo padiglione e uscivano da questo padiglione sorridendo perché avevano capito tutto. Non sempre la Biennale, tutte le biennali che sono anche di frontiera, che sono anche di complessità, di concettualità, producono il sorriso soddisfatto della comprensione e della soddisfazione, perché sono più complesse, se vogliamo. Ecco, il nostro padiglione, che ha raccontato l'intelligenza di Venezia nei suoi 1600 anni di vita, ecco, destava la gioia, il sorriso della comprensione di questa città millenaria che si è costruita in un ambiente impossibile. Vedete, abbiamo costruito tutto questo assieme a Benno Albrecht, rettore di architettura Paolo Costa, professore, sindaco, ministro, Pierpaolo Campostrini, questo signore qua. L'esposizione ha voluto raccontare quale intelligenza abbia reso possibile l'impossibile, una storia millenaria capace di tenere insieme natura e cultura, tecnica e bellezza, scienza e visione. Vedete, senza leggere, Venezia è una città impossibile. Non esiste una città capitale del mondo come Venezia, nella sua storia, dentro una laguna. Di più, non esistono le lagune che durano così tanti secoli come la laguna di Venezia, semplicemente perché la laguna di Venezia è una laguna artificiale, costruita dall'uomo, difesa dall'uomo, manutenuta dall'uomo, così come Venezia è una città costruita dentro una laguna come non è successo in nessun'altra parte del mondo. Ecco, questa è l'essenza di questa città che adesso si proietta in questa dimensione tecnologica che di fronte all'ambiente, di fronte all'innalzamento del medio mare, vale a dire a un evento straordinario previsto e prevedibile, ecco, Venezia ancora una volta con la sua intelligenza comunitaria ha dato una risposta, ma non un progetto, ha dato una risposta funzionante che funziona e che funzionerà per i prossimi 60, 80, 100 anni. Cioè una generazione, ricordo me stesso, è di 25 anni. 2 generazioni sono 50, 3 generazioni sono 75, quindi ci vorranno 3 generazioni di Campostrini, 4 generazioni di Brunetta, perché la sicurezza prodotta dal Mose venga messa in discussione. Ma io spero tanto che le generazioni di Campostrini, di Brunetta, di Buttafuoco, eccetera, troveranno altre soluzioni. Ecco, Venezia si candida a questo, cioè si candida dopo aver trovato la sua soluzione. Mose, dighe, 1600 metri lineari d'acciaio affondate, principio di Archimede, si alzano quando serve, spariscono quando non servono più, 2 metri, 2 metri e 20, 2 metri e 30 di margine tra mare e laguna. Bene, oggi Venezia è la città costiera più sicura al mondo. Il Mose la difende, noi ci candidiamo ad essere il punto di riferimento di tutte le strategie, di tutte le elaborazioni, le analisi, le valutazioni scientifiche legate a questo straordinario e spaventoso fenomeno del discioglimento delle calotte e dell'innalzamento del medio mare per il resto del mondo. Vedete, non sono solo a rischio le città costiere. Si faceva qualche stima imprecisa. Metà della popolazione mondiale? Ma pensate che dentro le città costiere, nelle vicinanze delle città costiere, questo è un punto di passaggio importantissimo, normalmente ci sono i porti. Cosa sono i porti? I porti sono gli elementi di connessione delle città costiere con tutte le altre città costiere del mondo attraverso il mare. I porti sono i punti i nodi di contatto del mondo attraverso i mari. Ma non solo delle merci, ma delle persone, delle culture. Attraverso i porti si è costruita la cultura del mondo, del Mediterraneo piuttosto che del Pacifico, piuttosto che dell'Atlantico, di tutti gli altri mari. I porti. Bene, l'innalzamento del medio mare spiazza, rende inservibili tutti gli investimenti fatti negli ultimi millenni, perché un porto normalmente dura secoli, se non millenni, nel mondo. E vuol dire che le connessioni, le interconnessioni, i rapporti del mondo sono a rischio o servono degli investimenti enormi per sostituirli. Che cosa? Con qualcos'altro, le banchine rialzate di 2-3 metri. Pensate ai costi di ristrutturazione dei porti, delle infrastrutture dei porti in ragione dell'innalzamento del medio mare, perché una città si sposta, ma un porto non si sposta. O un porto è sul mare, quindi devi ricostruirlo da capo. Quindi questo è il pericolo. Ma normalmente, tra l'altro, vicino ai porti ci sono delle altre infrastrutture che assomigliano ai porti e che hanno un nome simile, che si chiamano aeroporti. Normalmente sono sullo stesso livello. Ecco, anche gli aeroporti, dall'innalzamento del medio mare, vengono spiazzati, vengono resi, almeno così come sono, inservibili, inutilizzabili, o dovrebbero richiedere enormi quantità di investimenti per continuare a funzionare. Ecco, perché tanta rimozione rispetto a un fenomeno di questo tipo? Forse perché è proiettato da qui a 20, 30, 40, 50 anni, ma sì, sono tante generazioni. ma le generazioni passano, arrivano poi alla fine. Quindi il fatto di metterci a studiare a partire da Venezia, a partire di quello che abbiamo fatto noi negli ultimi 20-30 anni con il MOSE, diventa una missione storica. Allora questo è il piccolo messaggio che intendiamo dare. Fondazione Venezia Capitale Mondiale della Sostenibilità, assieme alla Fondazione Biennale, di essere il punto di riferimento delle esperienze, degli studi, delle sperimentazioni, per invitare qui, ogni 2 anni, presso la Fondazione che ho l'onore di presiedere, tutti quelli che stanno studiando concretamente questo fenomeno, questi fenomeni, e tutti quelli che stanno progettando opere o percorsi, ipotesi di soluzione rispetto a tutto questo. Ripeto, non c'è una soluzione, perché quella di Venezia non è riproponibile per tutto il mondo, ma è una. Leggevo con un qualche sorriso che forse il modello MOSE potrebbe servire per la chiusura di Gibilterra, moltiplicato magari per 10 dal punto di vista della lunghezza, ma per mettere in sicurezza l'intero Mediterraneo. Sorriso, sì, forse, ma anche sul MOSE sorridevano. Eppure è stato realizzato. Allora, soluzioni parziali legate a singoli quadranti del mondo, ecco, ci piacerebbe ospitarle qui nei prossimi anni. Allora per Paolo Campostrini e con tutti quelli che vorranno, metteremo insieme il meglio della riflessione scientifica, il meglio delle reti internazionali che già sono presenti dentro il nostro piano di attività, ospitarli qui a Venezia per organizzare tra 2 anni una mostra con tutte le esperienze in atto nel mondo, le esperienze, i progetti, le idee, con tutta l'immaginazione possibile. E a questo punto vado verso la fine. Venezia paga così, potrebbe pagare così un tributo al mondo. Nel passato era il mondo che si preoccupava di Venezia, salviamo Venezia. E devo dire questo è servito molto a far maturare la percezione nazionale sulla necessità di un'opera come quella straordinaria del MOSE. Bene, adesso il quadro si inverte. È Venezia che a partire dalla sua soluzione pragmatica, molto semplice, molto basilare, qualcuno direbbe proprio molto principio di Archimede, fai entrare dell'aria a pressione dentro i cassoni pieni d'acqua, i cassoni si svuotano, si alzano e fanno la barriera. Geniale banalità che sta salvando questa città. Bene, Venezia adesso si preoccupa del mondo. Venezia che può salvare il mondo, presentando il suo modello, certamente, ma presentando tutti gli altri modelli che si saranno definiti nel tempo, che si definiranno nel tempo, ma anche per sottolineare progressivamente la necessità di occuparsi di questo tema rimosso, perché questo è un tema rimosso, l'innalzamento del medio mare, è un tema rimosso quasi psicanaliticamente, perché talmente enorme è il problema che per ragioni di sopravvivenza biologica probabilmente si realizza una rimozione psicologico-psicanalitica come se non esistesse il problema. Invece c'è, esiste e progressivamente spiazzerà la nostra civiltà, perché la nostra civiltà è costruita sul mare, è costruita sui porti, è costruita sulle città costiere. Ecco, se non vogliamo che la nostra civiltà imploda un po' alla volta, dobbiamo riflettere, parlare, e il nostro compito con le nostre forze sarà proprio questo, che ogni 2 anni noi raccoglieremo il meglio della riflessione scientifica, tecnologica, ideativa, per dire quello che si sta facendo e per sottolineare, molto probabilmente, che non si sta facendo abbastanza, partendo da una sola considerazione, che noi quello che potevamo fare l'abbiamo fatto, perché Venezia, da 1600 anni, è da sempre la più antica città del futuro. Vi ringrazio.
Grazie. Ma anche qui abbiamo avuto un bellissimo discorso con cibo per le nostre menti e un invito anche all'azione. Dopo adesso da qua in poi comincia la parte internazionale vera e propria, quindi userò la lingua inglese, questo dialetto extraeuropeo che tutti usiamo per farci capire meglio. E allora I would like to introduce the 4 speakers that are here presently. If they can come to me, please. Be careful on the steps. Francesco Musco, Agustin Sanchez Arcilla, Abdul Karir Shettima, and Natalia Alonso Cano. They will be our speaker for this first session. Some of them are belonging to university, and some other are responsible and engaged in international organizations. So we put the knowledge and the international relationship at the center of this first step of reflection. Francesco, you do not need to sit because you will be the first. Francesco Musco is a full professor of urban planning. The other can take the seat. Leave me this one for me, and you can sit there. Francesco Musco is full professor of urban planning and design in the Department of Architecture and Arts at the University U of Venice, where he is the director of research. He founded and directed the master course in urban planning for transition and coordinated the Erasmus Master on Maritime Spatial Planning. He's also president of Corilla, and his work bridges up urban and environmental planning, focusing on sustainability, resilience, and climate-proof regeneration. Among his current experience, he is a scientific advisor of the Italian Maritime Spatial Plans. Founder of the Planning Climate Change Lab, he leads international research and consultancy on resilient cities and adaptive spatial strategies of coastal cities. Francesco, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pierpaolo. Thanks to all the organizer and to Venice Science Foundation in particular. I would like to introduce you a perspective that is mainly the perspective of spatial planning and how spatial planning can contribute to favor of the adaptation of coastal cities and coastal system in general. Also opening some windows on some cases, but also trying to understand in which way the coordination that is properly connected with any planning instruments can favor the coordination, also adaptation, including technological measure, but also measure that could be more oriented to governance of spatial dimension. Why spatial planning matters? Matters for many reasons, also already introduced by Professor Brunetta, by Pierpaolo Campostrini, but also by Pierangelo Buttafuoco, the president of Biennale, because coastal cities more or less include more than 600 million people that lives around coastal system. It's absolutely fundamental that the contribution of coastal cities to adaptation can be favored also by different perspectives that could be connected with the capacity of coastal communities to be adapted to the global change. And in general, global change emerges in a dimension that is essentially connected with the capacity of the coastal system to understand which kind of impacts are emerging along the coastal system and which kind of system can be implemented in terms of protection, accommodation, strategic expansion, and retreat. The possible perspective that would be included in the dimension of the adaptation of a coastal system that could be properly coordinate different kind of measures. Measures that could be extreme technological and infrastructural, as the MOSE system, for example, but also measures that instead are more oriented to a perspective of nature-based solution, of capacity of a coastal system to counteract the emerging of extreme weather event, that especially looking at the perspective of spatial planning is one of the main perspectives that we try to take care. Obviously, European coastal regions, if we look at Europe in particular, have many kind of perspective, in the sense that protection remain the dominant perspective, retreats remain quite rare, luckily, but in some part of Europe, especially in the northern part of Europe, some reflection about how spatial plans can contribute to a medium-term solution in terms also retreat in some places of communities. It's already in the public agenda. Strategic expansion is also another perspective that is considering one possibility in some coastal system, and also the accommodation, especially to counteract the impact with special attention to, for example, to coastal cities. And the coastal system of Veneto region is one of the that is emerging the attention in terms of long-term perspective for the perspective of sea level rise. And how sea level rise can impact, especially in different perspective or solution that could be taken in consideration. If we look at especially Northern Adriatic Ionian region, we take in consideration solution as beach nourishment, dune reconstruction, reinforced shoreline structure, river embankments, for example, especially at the mouth of rivers. The Po Delta is one of the examples that I will try to provide you. Especially because the single solution could be operating in collaboration with solutions that try to coordinate the capacity of a single technological or soft solution to work properly to favor the adaptation along the coastal system. And especially in Veneto region, taking in consideration the wider system, is absolutely fundamental taking care that exactly the infrastructure from port, airports, and motorways, railways, and all the physical infrastructure that try to favor connection and mobility operates in a buffer area that in the medium term could be affected by extreme weather events and in particular also by long-term events as a sea level rise. How we start to plan a long-term future that obviously starts from the example of Venice, but could operate also taking in consideration long-term strategies. It's possible as a fundamental counteract the problems of impact along the coastal line, also trying to reconnect land and sea, especially in the spatial planning dimension. Is absolutely fundamental, taking in consideration the continuity of the solutions and the continuity of spatial planning dimension, because it permits to coordinate and operate, also overcoming also the limits of administrative issues that in many conditions try to limit the capacity of spatial dimension to be operative in terms of coordination and capacity of counteracting the global impact. Land-sea interaction, in particular, is a place where we have to coordinate the solution adaptation along the coastal system, and in particular, the capacity of spatial planning to interact also with maritime dimension. I quote this plan, the plan of maritime space, because I'm quite proud of this, because it's about the collective intelligence. It's a plan that we are coordinating. We coordinated and we are coordinating from Venice for the Italian government. It's the maritime spatial plan for Italy, and has a similar process that happened around Europe in the last few years due to the European Directive 89 of 2014 that essentially introduced maritime spatial planning as compulsory in all the member states of Europe. It's quite a revolution in our perspective, because this means looking at maritime space from the city, but also looking maritime cities from the maritime space in the same way, taking together the problem and supporting blue growth. Maritime spatial planning for Italy is a fundamental asset that tries to governate problems, favor blue growth, but at the same time having the capacity to coordinate a solution of coastal governance and coastal planning. The plan has been approved recently, and it is coordinated from the scientific point of view by the scientific group composed by Corila, UAV, and the National Research Center, ISMER. It's absolutely fundamental because it means that is another example of collective action started from Venice, but available for all the country, especially in Italy, but also for the Mediterranean, because some action in terms of coordination of activities in spatial planning for maritime space are coordinating from our point here in Venice, also for Mediterranean. It's an absolutely fundamental instrument that permits us to introduce the spatial dimension, also taking in consideration the maritime space, and overcoming also the fragmented, in some way, policies that until now have characterized most of Mediterranean action in many countries. The capacity to coordinate and the capacity to keep the spatial dimension of interaction within under the umbrella of planning dimension. And similar example can be done around the coastal line of Adriatic, and particularly we can look at Delta Po, looking at the coastal system of Veneto region. It's a very strategic area where the interface land-sea is characterized since some centuries. The capacity to coordinate spatial planning dimension, taking in consideration the connection between public policy and the capacity to coordinate the activities on maintaining biodiversity, for example, but at the same time, hydraulic regulation of these areas. Taking in consideration also experience of setback zones that already has been experimented in this area of the region, taking in consideration of the capacity of having an area that is totally between land and sea, and how is possible to regulate a place like this, taking in consideration of all the solution of adaptation, but also the solution of advanced management in terms also of wetland restoration, or also, for example, dune reconstruction along the border of coastal line. All this requires a capacity to manage a multi-risk dimension and a multi-level planning, taking in consideration of the local expectation, but also the capacity of being an example for Mediterranean. So the capacity to use planning system with multiple uses, the capacity to regulate the uses of land, but also to regulate and coordinate public policies for the different coastal regions. And the similar example can be done also looking at more Northern Europe. In particular, I tried to provide you just the example of the area of Rotterdam and Dutch Delta, simply because maybe it's an example from which we can learn something, especially in the capacity of spatial planning at the different level of government to coordinate public action to protect, to maintain, and to favor the interaction between land and water. Essentially because of the national plan try to keep under the umbrella of the same plan all the public expenditure that are oriented also to invest and to maintain the area. No expansion to the coastline, for example, the creation of river buffer zones, but also in particular the use of an adaptive capacity long-term pathway with planning decisions that are connected directly with the different areas and the different impact of expected for sea level rise in a different area of a country. Other example experimented, done in this case in the last few years are, for example, the sun motor, that is an engineer infrastructure, but in main accordingly a perspective on nature-based solution in terms of a huge artificial sand body that gradually have a capacity to redistribute along around 20 kilometers of the coast of the sand to maintain the coastal line. And also at the same time, an example of reinforcing dunes and also to favor the flood defense of a different part of the country. But the same kind of reflection can be done at looking in particularly the attention to the urban public space. Urban public space, especially in coastal regions and coastal cities, can represent a point of experimentation with a very high level of interaction with the capacity of protecting a coastal system. In particular, introducing floating neighborhoods and services, adaptive public spaces, temporary uses, for example, and inclusion of ecological corridor. Show that also urban regeneration along coastal regions and coastal cities can be a process that include and favor adaptation along the coastal cities. Try to summarize some reflection that emerged from the relationship between coastal planning and in particular coastal adaptation as a spatial choice. I stress the perspective of spatial choice simply because of the capacity of spatial dimension to keep together and coordinate the different activities and policies operating in different coastal regions can be more effectful of separate initiatives that could be operating in the different countries and different coastal regions. Some elements that could emerge from a view that taking in consideration of the relationship between spatial planning and coastal system are connected to the capacity to maintain and management sediment and space as a core adaptation resources. For example, taking in consideration of the fact that coastal lines in many cases lack both. Thus, governance of sediment transport become one of the essential perspectives to be considered in the adaptation measure. And then coastal adaptation requires long-term spatial strategies, not short-term projects. The example coming from Venice, but all from Mediterranean and in general by the different contexts of Europe are quite representative in the capacity of a different coastal system to operate overlapping measures that could be more technological, but also solutions that could require a strong public engagement of local communities living on coastal system. Coastal adaptation requires the strategies. Retreat is not still politically, is quite controversial. It's very difficult, especially looking in Mediterranean. Obviously, before comes protection, but in some part of Europe, for example, in Netherlands, some initiatives also of retreat in some areas are starting to be planned in the long term. And then cultural heritage, for example, is another point that, especially looking at the example of Venice, could be very representative to be integrated in the coastal dimension adaptation measure. And then the other point that I wish to stress is that the adaptation is not only technical, it's social, cultural, and political. It requires communities and the involvement of communities to understand the risk, to accept a transition to a different way to manage a coastal system, also including participation in the decision system. How can we transform the challenge of sea level rise into an opportunity to strengthen the bond between cities and their inhabitants. Maybe this is one of the questions we can try to answer, also with the support of spatial planning animation, that, in my point of view, can represent a way to coordinate properly activities on coastal system and coastal cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, Francesco. Very clear, I believe. And also this dimension of planning is quite important. We heard also from the words of the initial speakers how important is the connection between the sea and the land. So sometimes, just to give you another number, the planning that we did on the maritime area, which is under Italian jurisdiction, is just the double of the land that we are planning with other systems. So Italy has jurisdiction on 600,000 of square kilometers, which is more or less the double of the terrestrial land of Italy. So it is quite important. The sea is really a part of our society. I have a lot of pleasure to have Agustin Sanchez-Archila here. Agustin is Emeritus Professor at Catalonia University of Technology. He was the director of Laboratory of Maritime Engineering for many years and the Vice President of International Center for Coastal Research in that university since 1993. He's always worked in the maritime, coastal and harbor engineering, and he published over 25 books and 200 research projects. We are together we have been together in several European projects, presently also in one, which is a COSCAPE. Other people also here. It's a network of people which is overlapping also to the network of scientists. It's not only a network of scientists, it's a network of people. That's why I'm very glad to give you the floor, Agustin, here. Thank you for coming.
Many thanks, Pierpaolo, for the opportunity to give this talk in here. Mille grazie per l'invito. That's about all my Italian. I'm going to talk about, let's say, try to answer some of the questions that Pierpaolo raised, and that comes out of two ongoing European projects. On your left-hand side, you have RESCOS, which is a project that stands for Coastal Restoration. On your right-hand side, behind the watch, there is another logo for another project which has just started, which is called Coastscapes. So I'll try to present the type of knowledge that we are putting forward for decisions, the type of advances we're going to, or we should be expecting from this ongoing project, these two and many others, of course, and I've called that the synergies and trade-offs for a restoration of the coastal system, which is wider than the coastal fringe. Then, what should we expect from coordinated science? And my answer would be adaptation to restoration plans, and then with the next future will bring to us. And for me, that is rethinking the coastal scapes, the coastal space, you could say, for natural resilience combined with man-made resilience. So as an illustration of how to adapt in the short term means early warning systems. I'm showing you two illustrations. On your left-hand side, there is an early warning system for the Venice Lagoon. It's been developed by the Italian colleagues working in the RESCOS project. And my point in here is that it not only provides an early warning system, you can use those same models to assess the effectiveness of, for instance, deploying seagrass meadows to reduce flooding, to reduce erosion, and to improve water quality. You have a paper below that to give you more information. On your right-hand side, you can have a look at the early warning system for the Ebro Delta in the Spanish Mediterranean coast, where you can see the capacity of those models to predict the breaching of those beaches. So 7 days in advance, you can know what is going to happen. You also have a paper in there telling you about the details. In the long term, we have what we've been calling climate warning systems. It's similar to early warning system, but climate warning gives you a warning at a decadal scale, so a time scale consistent with climate change. On your left-hand side, you have an illustration of the climate warning system for the Wadden Sea, let's say in between Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. We've been developing those models for the Elms and Dollard estuaries, which is part of the Dutch stretch of coast. And on your right-hand side, you have a climate warning system, against for the Venice Lagoon, telling you the amounts of hypoxia events, the intensity and number, let's say a few decades from now in 2050 and in 2100. That gives you, again, an illustration of what those climate warning systems, again, based on numerical models, which are consistent with the early warning system, can tell you about the planning that you need for adapting to climate change. My answer to the knowledge put forward in these projects to better adapt a coastal system is systemic restoration. That means a strategy that spans both the river and the coast. When we say the river, it's just the lower river course. Have an example in there. On your left-hand side, you can see the lower part of the Ebro River course in the Spanish Mediterranean. And on your right-hand side, you can see what we are calling embryonic dunes. So very small dunes. It's a new paradigm for coastal protection rather than big dunes, because we do not have enough sand available. And also because we want to reduce, to curb the carbon footprint of those interventions. We are building, constructing small-sized dunes, which are continuously maintained using those early warning systems. So what we are doing in there is, on the first hand, we're organizing, the River Authority is carrying out control river floods, control river pulses, which are strong enough to transport sediment downstream. Then, when that sediment reaches the beach, we are deploying that sediment in the best possible manner so that it has the longest possible duration. And we're monitoring everything, and we're transferring that information to something that we call coastal restoration platforms, which is a get-together of all relevant stakeholders. So the central government, the Catalan government, the local municipalities, conservation groups, scientists, and so on. You have some further information on how we've organized that in that paper that you can see below your screen. That is an example of the control floods we are organizing. That's a collective effort. There's lots of institutions. You can see some of the logos in there. And the main point is how to organize that in a context of freshwater scarcity. When we started this project, it was 2021, where Corilla is also a member, of course. There was enough freshwater available to organize twice of those controlled floods per year. In 2022 and 2023, we couldn't organize any of those controlled floods because of the drought that Southern Europe was experiencing. Now, in 2024 and 2025, there's been more rain, and we can organize those controlled floods. We're monitoring the amount of water that we need. We're monitoring how to enhance the sand and sediment transport, and that is basically by lowering the water level in the reservoirs just before the controlled flood. If you lower the water level in the reservoirs, then the water is better able to exert a bed shear stress, so to mobilize the sediment deposited in the reservoirs. Of course, there's lots of troubles that we have to solve before that is put into practice. First of all, we need to make sure that that sediment deposited in the reservoirs is clean enough. There's no danger, ecological or human, for the communities downstream. Then we also need to know the amount of sediment deposited in the reservoirs to know for how long that is going to last. And we need to know, once that sediment reaches the river mouth, where it's going to go. We cannot invest such a huge effort and then waste our solid discharge in, let's say, the next wave storm. That is another of the nature-based solutions we are deploying in the Ebro. Apart from the embryonic dunes that you can see on the bottom of your left-hand side image, we're also balancing the wave-induced transport with the wind-induced transport. So that is let's say, a smart way of making sure that the amount of sand needed to renourish that beach that you can see on your right-hand side is minimum. Like that, we reduce the carbon footprint, let's say for the decadal scale, but also the environmental impact for the short-term scale. Basically, we're controlling the wave-induced transport by submerged bars and the wind-induced transport by constructed dunes. and monitoring everything all the time, of course. Because we were in Italy, I've selected another of the approaches we're using to restore our coastal system from another of the test cases we have within the RESCOS project in southern Italy, in Sicily. There, what the Italian colleagues have done is to put on the table a collection of nature-based solutions building blocks, so as to tell the stakeholders that there's not just one solution. There's not a silver bullet able to solve all your problems. What you have to do is to combine those nature-based solutions, which is connectivity, which is restoration of marshes, which is restoration of submerged sandbars in front of the beach, and put all that together in a structured and sequential manner so that the resilience of that piece of coast in Sicily is, let's say, sort of maximized. The restoration that we are carrying out within the first of the two projects I mentioned, RESCOS, is being deployed and tested in 9 pilot sites in Europe. So it's been tested, I will not be describing all of them for you, it's been tested in the Venice Lagoon, it's been tested in the Rhone Delta, in the Ebro Delta, in the Baltic, in a new island in the Vistula Lagoon, in the Foros Bay, in the Black Sea. So it covers a number of European regional seas, and also it's been tested in a very small basin, also subject to severe freshwater scarcity in Israel. It's in the Dalia stream, in the Nahal Dalia. And just to show that the need for coordination, the European Union, when they launched these projects after approval and so on, they asked us to coordinate with other ongoing projects. For the RESCOS case, we're working together with 3 other projects, with many of the colleagues are also partners, just by chance. And we've produced a number of policy briefs. For instance, RESCOS has been twinned to 3 river-oriented projects, just to recognize that if you restore your river, that may not always be in the best interest of your coast. So you need to strike some sort of agreement between river restoration and coastal restoration. And that is what we produce in the frame of those agreements. There's a policy brief on that you have the reference at the bottom of the page. The approach that we are using is that, as we've heard in the previous talk, adaptation and restoration is not only technical, it also has to do with the financing, with the governance, and with the policies. And we started by identifying the main barriers for large-scale restoration projects, and then within our work, within that RESCOS project, we have built what we call enablers. Enablers means the tools that we've put forward at the disposal of the stakeholders, for instance, the early warning system and so on. So what you see below is how we transfer that to the coastal restoration platforms with the aim of decarbonizing coastal protection. And by way of continuation, we started only this September a new project called Coastscapes, which, let's say, continues along the same lines, but where the main aim is to rethink the coastal landscape and seascape so as to make the most for both systems, terrestrial and marine. We have a number of pilot cases, and what we've done is to organize them in triads. So we have the co-pilots, which, for instance, is a coastal lagoon in Spain called Mar Menor, but also the Venice Lagoon, for instance. Then the next category is the replicating pilots, where they try to, there's always a two-way exchange. It's not that the replicating pilots learn from the coastal co-pilots. It's in the two directions. The co-pilots also learn from them. And then the transfer pilots, for instance, in the Mar Chica Lagoon in Morocco. So we all learn from one another. And just to give you an example, we have a co-pilot, which is the Weser estuary. We have a replicating pilot, which is the Aveiro Lagoon. We have all types of complexities in there. We need to learn from one another. The climate, the society, the economy is different. And then we're trying to extrapolate all that to other cases. We already have some publications showing you how to do that, showing you how the amount of available information is different from site to site, how the what we found, which is very funny, is that the level of impatience of our societies is different from country to country. You cannot tell them, well, be a little patient with me, bear with me, because in 20 years we shall have those seagrass beds working and you'll be safe. That's not enough for our impatient society. And by way of, let's say, transferring that evolution, those tools to other countries, we have a transfer pilot. We call it Transfer Pilot, but we've been working together with them for more than 1 decade. It's in Mozambique, it's called Inhambane Bay, and there we've put operational a number of numerical models. They have very good people who have been able to receive those models and to make them operational. But it's not only the models, it's also the field data that you need to calibrate those models and to make sure that your decisions are based on real data, so that you can feel reliable, that you're not basing your decisions on numerical simulations. And what we found out, that we've discovered that it's also applicable to Europe, is that do-it-yourself measuring equipment is a nice alternative. It's about, let's say, less than 1/10, sometimes it's 2 to 3% of the cost of conventional equipment. But if you do not have enough local technicians, that is a very direct way to feed your model. Also, you need a lot of measuring stations because they are cheap. They can provide that with the spatial resolution that you need to take your decisions. And finally, this is my last overhead. We're putting forward coastal restoration contracts. We discovered in our coastal restoration platforms that if we want this to last, it's not just a matter of working for years, and then once the project is over, we forget about that and we go back home. We need something to remain there, and that's what we call the coastal restoration platforms, structured by coastal restoration contracts or agreements. We started calling them contracts. They've been signed in some of the pilot cases, but other stakeholders didn't feel comfortable with contracts. They prefer the word agreements. So in a recent paper that you can see below your image that was published, I think it was last month, we've put forward the structure for those coastal restoration agreements, which is very simple. It's just the partners, the responsibilities, and then the adaptation through restoration plans that we are suggesting and the types of solutions. And of course, without forgetting the monitoring and maintenance together with the funding that we need for all that to work. And that's it. That is how we are developing local geodiversity in the Ebro Delta to reduce sediment transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Agustin. Yes, let me comment just these 2 last interventions, which are coming from university professor. What Agustin said about the coordinated research is something that I would like to underline 2 times, because I am director of a coordination center, so I know how much efforts should be done for coordinating science. But this kind of science is needed for making what is known as a knowledge-based decision, because scientists do not take a decision, luckily. It's the policymaker which makes the decision, the administrator of the cities, the administration of the countries, but we are the duty to provide the useful knowledge for them, because it is important and that's why we are keeping together. I would like just to mention again that in these last 2 projects, Corilla is involved with his own research organization body, but is also the new authority for the lagoon is involved too. So we take in the dialogue between science and policy directly sometimes, as far as we can, those which have the duty to intervene, to manage the lagoon and the coast and the sea. So now is a new way of dialogue between science and policy, which we are trying. So this is why we are able also to take all this informed decision to the policymaker. Okay, now we heard the different point of view. It's a pleasure to have here Dr. Abdul Kadir Shettima, which is the director of the African School of Regulation. He brings over 2 decades of leadership experience in electricity market development, regulatory reform, and energy policy across Africa. He's an energy economist. He has held several senior positions at the Nigerian electricity Regulatory Commission. He holds a PhD in energy economics from the University of Buckingham and an MBA in banking and finance. His research focuses on energy poverty, energy transition, and sector efficiency, with high-impact peer-reviewed publication for his credit. So, for Abdul Qadir, my question was to explain how climate change are affecting the resilience of the system that support the life and economy, in all the countries. The adaptation effort should include an intervention for achieving a more efficient and reliable electrical grid system, also in coastal areas subject to sea level rise. How policy, regulation, and education can accelerate a just and inclusive energy transition across Africa?
Thank you very much, Pierpaolo. Let me start by thanking the Venice Sustainability Foundation, Alejandro Costa, for inviting us, and Pierpaolo Campostrini for not just the invitation, but for addressing travel challenges regarding visa issues. It was stressful, but you sorted a big problem. Let me also thank the government of Italy and the people of Venice for organizing this event. It is very crucial. One, as we learned from Professor Brunetta, that about half of the world's population is living in coastal areas. And this is a very big challenge for humanity, and it's existential, I must say. But I would also want to point out that all the problems that are being felt or experienced in Venice and other coastal places, it's several-fold in Africa. The challenges here exist, then plus more challenges. The city of Lagos, for instance, the name Lagos is actually coined from lagoon. It's pretty much similar to the environment here, where most of the transportation is by canoes, and the houses are right, on the lagoon. So Lagos is experiencing the same thing Venice is experiencing, but several-fold. Just imagine experiencing the same without electricity. In Africa, we have to contend with not just the issue of coastal resilience, but also energy poverty. 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity. And the ones that have access also have to contend with frequent outages. So you can imagine the scale of the problem. First, let me introduce the African School of Regulation. The ASR is a Pan-African institution, center of excellence, that focuses on strengthening energy regulation and policy development in Africa. And our vision is to see a transformed African energy sector that delivers reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy for all without leaving anyone behind. Our mission is twofold: to build the human capacity through training of regulators and policymakers, but also to reform defective regulatory frameworks that hinder private sector capital. The climate energy reality is, as I mentioned, dual-fold in Africa. And it is exacerbated by extreme weather on one hand that affects the resilience of the grid, increases system losses, but also sea level rise causes flooding and affects electrical infrastructure. So Africa must be resilient in addressing climate change effects, but also must triple generation to ensure that Africans have access to modern energy services. I've already mentioned this, but the key cities, and for example, in Africa, Lagos in Nigeria, St. Louis in Senegal, Quetta in Ghana, face severe flooding, erosion, and displacement risks. Venice's historical model with flooding offers lessons for African cities on resilience and adaptation. Why adaptation must be central? The criticality of the infrastructure being flooded, causing outages in the midst of energy poverty is a huge challenge that must be well planned and addressed. Apart from rising temperatures, hydrological risks also causes energy shortage where the dams are empty and they cannot power the turbines. So planning must take into consideration climate adaptation. Siting of power plants is crucial. Professor Renato Brunetta mentioned that airports are being affected, but I would like to know whether power plants, how Venice has addressed the issue of energy infrastructure. Is it that they are sited far away on the mainland? That could be a strategy. It could be a lesson for us in Africa. For example, in Nigeria, the largest power plant, 1,000 megawatts, is sited in Lagos and is susceptible to flooding. So perhaps better planning and siting could be a solution. Spatial planning, many of the speakers earlier on have mentioned, must take into consideration climate adaptation. But in Africa, it goes more than that. You have to factor in the population density, existing infrastructure, resource availability, and also conflict zones. Earlier on, Admiral Guglielmi mentioned the issue of disputes coming up if these climate adaptation issues and coastal resilience is not well addressed. Well, Africa is already facing that issue. There are so many conflicts in Africa, violent conflicts due to climate adaptation and resource availability concerns. So the problem is several-fold and would be very happy for cross-exchange of ideas and knowledge transfer to help address these challenges in Africa. Now, how do we respond? First, policies and frameworks must empower local municipalities to address coastal vulnerabilities. This aligns very well with Kamal Kishore's message that local governments must plan, invest, and engage communities to address these challenges. Contextualizing the solutions is also critical. We have to not just copy and paste, but adapt it to local realities because there are much more complexities in Africa. And inclusivity and gender mainstreaming is also very crucial, and that is one aspect in the African School of Regulation that we address when we are giving our capacity building initiatives. Now, policies and priorities for coastal resilience. We have to ensure that there is mandatory climate risk assessments for new energy infrastructure. Coastal corridor protection strategies have to be in place to ensure that assets are well protected. We have to ensure there is integration of distributed energy so that there is backup, there is redundancy in the system. And then there must be incentives for the use of resilient materials, elevating substations to minimize the effects of flooding, and the use of digital solutions. We must also not forget that capacity building and knowledge transfer is always crucial. Now, without regulations, policies are just plans. They don't translate to action. We must ensure that regulatory tools recognize climate resilience. And how do we do that? We have to allow investments by utilities in terms of upgrading their systems to be resilient to effects of climate change. So those costs have to be recognized by the regulators to incentivize utilities to make investments to protect assets. Regulations must also be performance-based, where investments can be rewarded, and digitalization and use of modern smart grids would be incentivized. Planning for sea level rise, storms, and extreme heat must be well structured from planning to implementation. And then grid codes must recognize the integration of renewables. Africa is abundant in solar and wind and other forms of renewable energies, but integrating them into the grid is the critical challenge, but this has to be planned for and incentivized by regulation. Now, the second part of how we respond is collaboration. Again, a number of speakers have mentioned collaboration. Global collaboration is crucial. We have to share lessons. This kind of dialogue is very welcomed, where we share lessons on global best practices to build resilience, just as Venice has done over the years. But we must develop localized adaptation strategies that fit African realities. And we must build capacity through exchange of knowledge, through research, training, and technology transfer. So I must reiterate our gratitude for the Venice Sustainability Foundation and the City of Venice for being open in gifting their knowledge to the other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, also for staying into the due time. Thank you. Now we have the pleasure to have Natalia Alonso Cano, which is the Chief of Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia of the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. We organized together, as I said before, this event. An agronomic engineer, she has worked 9 years overseas for the European Union and others on environmental resource management, governance, and disaster preparedness. Prior to this assignment, she was senior advisor at UNICEF EU office, where she led efforts to mainstream child rights into EU policy and practices. Her previous leadership roles in Brussels included serving as deputy director of Oxfam International, where she played a pivotal role in advocating for ambitious EU responses to climate change and inequality, while steering complex development humanitarian partnership portfolios. Natalia, you have the floor for us. I have to introduce also another thing, because 2025 makes 10 years from Sendai Declaration, Sendai Framework, which was a world conference on disaster risk reduction I was part of, so I remember very well what we say, and now we are close to the end of this agreement, so thinking for renewing it. So in this agreement it was put clear underlined the sea level rise and the problem of coastal cities, and the problem of the cities, which is the situation presently, and what are the plan that the UNDRR is doing for improving the resilience of coastal cities. Please, Natalia.
Thank you very much, and good morning, buongiorno. C'è un piacere essere qui avec voi, con voi. I would really like to start thanking sincerely the Venice Sustainability Foundation and the Biennale Foundation for bringing all of us together for this exchange, for this dialogue. We heard the powerful message coming from the SRSG, Kamal Kishore, and I think I would like to repeat just the essence of that message, is that the resilience is not only about the structures, but also about the spirit and the story of people. And I think Venice really represents, embodies that kind of message. As Pierpaolo was mentioning, we are 10 years over the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction that was agreed in 2015. And we have to, it's a right moment to ask ourselves, how far have we come in protecting coastal cities and cultural heritage? What do we need to do in the remaining 5 years that we have to achieve our goals? And I think a lot of the answers are coming from Venice, and I think has been mentioned today a few times. Venice is a leader of resilience, a city that is showing how global commitments get transferred and get transformed into local action. And obviously this is not coming out of the blue. It comes with a strong leadership, collaboration across sectors, and a clear vision, and resilience is part of the city's identity. And it's not only recent through the La Mose, but it's something that comes from the last years, as the exhibition mentions. So I'm very glad to join you here to share some of the reflections on how we can better protect coastal cities, but also cultural heritage, because they are living systems that require sustained engagement. So let me start talking about what is the situation today and the progress and gaps. Here you have an illustration about what has happened, how is the progress in the last 10 years. So in a number of areas, we are succeeding. We are doing well in reducing the disaster risk. For example, and it's very important, we are able and we have been able to reduce disaster mortality by half. This is a great success. Also, over 130 countries have now developed plans, disaster risk reduction strategies, and those include 33 countries in Europe and Central Asia, our region. And more risk reduction is increasingly embedded in the urban planning, and coastal and cultural heritage risk are now recognized in national agendas. So we are doing quite a lot of progress. And as it was mentioned, the Sendai framework has a monitoring system, and UNDRR collects the data reported by countries in their annual progress. And we can, as it was mentioned, we have one specific indicator that tracks economic losses to cultural heritage damaged or destroyed by disaster. It's not only the economic loss that we are losing, it's our identity, but it's important to be able to monitor and track these disaster losses. However, all this progress, you will see also some of the red dots here, is that in some areas we are not succeeding, and also that success is fragile. So in many ways, you can see here that, again, the figures, 49%, half of the mortality rate has gone down, but the number of people affected has increased massively. And we have to understand that there are newer risks, because the risks are shifting. Europe is the fastest warming continent, and the impacts of climate change risks are here now, with intensifying hazards like heat waves and flooding. And it's not only the impact on people, but also how they impact on financial systems, because the financial impacts are unsustainable. We know, and I'll just give you some figures about the coastal flooding already cost in the European Union around 1.2 billion every year. If we don't have stronger protections and prevention, damages could reach about 1 trillion by 2100, with nearly 4 million exposed each year. And we know that globally, water-related disasters cause an overall annual loss of 388 billion. That's a staggering figures. And from global to local, we know that local governments are on the front lines of these challenges. But many local authorities are facing some of the challenges as well, right? In terms of, the limited local capacity, because they might need additional technical, financial, and human resources to implement DR effectively. It's also the question about data, because you cannot address what you don't know. So you need to have local risk data and analysis of those data. And local level risk baselines, disaggregated data, and multi-hazard understanding of risk remain insufficient at this granular level that we need. And when it comes to cultural heritage, data is even more scarce, and local vulnerability assessments are not always available. The third shortcoming is the question of governance, is the question of inclusion and participation. So we need to have better governance in including local voices and communities to incorporate them in the planning. Finally, the question of financing and policy support of locally led disaster risk reduction. Few national systems provide dedicated funding and support for subnational DR action. And the question is that the financial losses of disasters are rapidly rising, but financing for local investments in resilience is challenging. And finally, the last point is that we have a fragmented implementation. Sometimes local efforts on disaster risk reduction are sometimes fragmented and not always well aligned with national strategies. So in short, just the message is we have made real progress, important progress, but rising risk and growing economic losses remind us that resilience efforts must be accelerated at all levels, and the action at local level is critical. So going to the question about, are cities ready? And the lessons from Venice. Venice has demonstrated leading practices of what is possible. Actually, Venice has even put their own resilience capacities under the microscope. Last year, the city carried out a participatory assessment of its cultural heritage resilience using a methodology that we have on disaster resilience scorecard, and specifically for cultural heritage. So Venice was, generous enough to say, this is what we have done, let's examine, let's evaluate that. This tool that was jointly done with us, with UNDRR, and with this initiative of making cities resilient, helps cities, all cities, to evaluate how well they are, how well positioned they are in protecting the cultural heritage against natural and man-made hazards. It looks at a different range of aspects, from governance, from planning, from financing, and the recovery. And the assessment in Venice was very comprehensive, involved 21 institutions, from local governments to civil protection, to museums, academia, and cultural foundations. All of them were involved in making this assessment from the different perspectives, and that the conclusions were very rich, and obviously concluded something that we know already. Venice is ahead in many areas. It integrates cultural heritage into urban planning and building codes, using traditional design guidelines to preserve identity while reducing risk. What is also very important is that Venice has managed to engage the community through cultural events and campaigns, making resilience part of everyday life. It also integrates populations that come, and it's a very touristic place, so a lot of tourist populations, students and commuters in a different disaster risk scenarios, which is also very important to make cities resilient in the long term. And also gives values to the natural buffers like the lagoon, and applies the traditional knowledge, the cultural knowledge on reducing flood risk. So this is some of the challenges. I forgot to mention to pass the slide, but this is some of the challenges that cities around the world face. And somehow this is some of the lessons that that we need to look at, and that Venice has been looking at that. So Venice, in this evaluation, also Venice identified where the areas that more support is needed. This includes obviously updating risk data in the face of new or complex threats, The risk that Venice is facing is changing, is not always the same, and there is a compounding impact of a number of hazards. Also, the expanding financial mechanism and embedding the cultural heritage in recovery plans. So just in my closing, mention that the kind of leadership that Venice has shown us is very important, and it's also very important the generosity of collaboration that Venice is showing. And that's why collaboration really matters, because the experience of Venice proves that resilience is possible, even in very complex contexts, and when local governments, cultural institutions, and communities work together. So in summary, the progress that we are making in disaster risk is positive, is encouraging, but the challenges are quite strong as well. We must start at local level with building this resilience. And in UNDRR, our role is to support cities in this journey with knowledge, with partnerships and practical tools to help these commitments, these policies into local action, and connecting also the science with the decision-making. So this work is even more important. Internally, we have adopted a new strategic framework from 2026 to 2030, and we have placed locally led disaster risk reduction as one of the key catalytic areas, because we see to accelerate results, we need to focus on the local action and empowering cities and communities to take this accelerated resilience. So together, we can protect not only our physical assets, but also our heritage, and even more, our identity that define our communities. Let's try to make the 5 years that we have in the Sendai framework count for Venice, for Europe, and for all coastal cities facing the same urgent reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you for reminding us, and also thank you for the continuous relationship. It's a long-lasting relationship that we are having as Venice with the UNDRR office. I remember one of the first conferences on cultural heritage and disaster risk reduction was held here in Palazzo Ducale, actually, 2010. So it is a very long period that we are discussing together, being both of us inspirational for both sides, the different actions. So I would like to thank you again with an applause from the audience, our distinguished speaker. You can try to, we do not have an interval. We are running, I'm sorry for this, asking you to stay awake, but it seems that nobody is sleeping. So I'm looking at you, and so I see from here that nobody is sleeping because all the speakers were quite really interesting. So we go directly to the second session, which is inspired to listen the different experience, even if we have already some experience from different parts of the world. We have two friends which are part of the Coast Scale project, the city of Aveiro in Portugal and the city of Nador in Morocco. And there is also one person which unfortunately was not able to come from Mozambique, but he will be connected from remote. I don't know whether the technical problems has been solved for having also the guest from Thailand. If not, we can proceed with these three experiences. Please, are you here? Okay, please sit down. I will introduce you briefly, and then I will ask you to come to the floor. Mimoun Al-Lahoul has been a professor of geology of the multidisciplinary faculty of Nador in Morocco since 2020. He obtained his PhD in environment and enhancement of sedimentary basins. He is conducting scientific research, particularly in environmental science and the study of risk zones. He is a member of the Holman BGPE laboratory. His objective is to study and conserve the lagoon of Nador, and he is a member of the Coastscape project. So, Mimoun, if you please give your voice from Nador, which we feel so close through the Mediterranean Sea that, as our Admiral said, is connecting the people. It's not separating. The sea is connecting the different countries. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Pierpaolo, and hello, everybody, and thank you for your hospitality here in Venice, and I will go through directly to our experience from Nador, which is smaller than Venice. It's 1/5 of the dimension of Venice. So directly we can see the title as Marchica Lagoon and towards the sustainability development. So for this, I can devise this period between one period before 2008 and what happened after 2008. This is a special date that separates between two big periods. And first period, of course, it will be the earlier 20th century, where appears the first urban centers. And we have 2008, that's a crucial time, that where we have the Marchica Agency appears. So, and we have after the 2008. We can have the development work carried until now, and I will present what some tasks and completed and some recommendation for the future. And as my colleagues already introduced the coastal area, you know that half of the world it's living on the coastal area less than 100 kilometers. So for the Mediterranean people, we have around a third of population, and Morocco, of course, part of this area. So Morocco, he involved in the several protocols like Kyoto and other protocols. And the localization of our lagoon, it's in the north of Morocco, northeast. And as you can see, and it's a lagoon between two headlands, and the Cap Trois Fourches and the Cap Dolo. And I will give some base data. So located in, it's considered like the second large lagoon in the south of Europe, and such it's important even for the birth life, the migration to this area, to the south of Africa. So they pass from this lake of Nador. And the site classified in like Ramsar since 2005, and is a center of classified like SIP. It's a biological and ecological interest. Surrounded by 4 municipalities and around 2,600 inhabitants. The 2008, there is the launch of the project of, we call it the project of 7 cities. And normally, geologically, it receives, the sediments are fine, like sand, silt, and clay. And finally, the surface, I can give you the surface, as I said, it's the 1/5 of the Venice volume. And the length is about 25 kilometers. 745.5 wide, and for depth it's around 8 meters. And the depth, as you can see, it's like the ellipse ball, whereas the center is the point, the depth point. So I will present directly the context, geographic and geological context. And we can find in this file, what is sorry for this, I'm going back. I'm sorry, I went back to the first time. Okay, the next slide. Maybe. Okay, now it's okay. Okay, this is the sediment distribution concerning the lagoon. We have usually the sand, the repartition of the distribution. You can see the sand at the center, where is the energetic movement, and we have at the border the clay. So these various problems that we can find in this area. It's not such the Venezia problems, but we have some different problems in this area. As you can see, we have the mountain around the lake, and this is the watershed limit, if we can just show it. We have some rivers that flow directly into the lagoon, but we have two special rivers that's red because they are dangerous. First one, it starts from the iron mine in the area that gives all the toxic element and the heavy metals. And you can see the liquid is very toxic and it's very acid, around 2 and 1.84. That means it's very acid. The other one, the second river, we have this public dump. So it brings all the material through the river to the lagoon of Marchica. And the third black point, we have, this is now the heart of the lagoon. We have what we call the Marost. It used to be an old ore washing plant. So the material gives from the mine, the iron mine, come until here, and the treatment, as you can see, in the settling basin. And you have now all the material, the toxic, the element, the heavy material, the heavy metal there, and everything is white because it's salt. It's a lake, a closed lake, where the evaporation is very tense. And you can see we have also, during all this period, all the waste, solid and liquid, come through into the lagoon. So we had also the underground, or the groundwater, all the leachate filtered and go, as you see, into the lagoon. So the lagoon, it's very complex regime, where it's influenced by Mediterranean and the groundwater, and also the continental water or surface water. So concerning the Mediterranean Sea, you can see that we had to have this normal or natural inlet that causes sometimes to block and to be closed. For this, in the sediment, we found that we have several periods that the water, it becomes more salty or more fresh water. And after that, they opened an old inlet, but it was since 1988. And after that, we arrived to the 2008, where everything will be changed according to this agency of Marchica, launched on a major development project of Marchica by the King of Morocco. They started on 2008. So the big Marchica, the project called the 7 cities. You can see we have this is the plan, how it should be in the future, the near future. So we can see this in the lagoon, of course, with the respect of the architecture of the area. And now we can move to the development work carried until now, so far. So what we have done until now, we can start, of course, to clean this area. It was around 1 century from this waste, liquid and solid waste flow into the lagoon. So now to start to clean from the upstream of Marchica, of course, and move into the center of the lagoon. So we started, for example, with the waste collection and sorting at special places, and new sewage treatment plant of the big Nador. We call it the big Nador because collect of the 4 communities, municipalities of around the Marchica, and of course a new controlled landfill start to be in the area. For the downstream, they made some constructions for the biodiversity in the lagoon, and of course they started to depollution of the lagoon. And now the actual position, and we are now at this stage where we have this city of Atalayon, where usually we had the mine, the plant of the ocean iron, and now the city of Nador. We had a new pass or a new inlet, and the city of the two seas, sorry. And finally, this ornithological park. And it's, by the way, it's the biggest in the South Mediterranean. And we have this water renewal time that goes now to the half. Before it was more, the water stays there, and it becomes very hard for the life sea. Other activities, we have some algae culture for the zone and the environment. So some tasks to be completed and recommendation, of course. Despite all this effort made, we have always environmental challenges remain significant and require continuous and coordinated work among the various stakeholders on cities. Such as, for example, we have this water eutrophisation, because we have always this material of pesticide come from the agriculture area that persists always in this area. So we have to manage this. And for example, for the sea level rise also, we have big problems. As you can see in this photo, just the level, it's just on the level of the city. You can see some 10 centimeters from the Nador. This is the center of Nador. For that, we have some 3 scenarios, 1 + 1 meter until 3 meters. You can see all what is in blue, it's under the water for 1 meter, and we have 2 meters, already some area of big Nador, it's under the water, and 3 meters, the major part of Nador, it's underwater. So 3 meters is very, very high level for Nador, and you can see the beach barrier, it becomes like a small island. So Nador, it will be without protection with that. And when it's we have some storm, we can we can see the algae come throughout the lagoon. And already have this erosion from the area. We started, for example, here you can see Marchica, it's at the left. And we have the erosion area, they started already to lose some meters. For example, here, we used to have 10 to 20 meters of beach. So now it's gone. And you can see the difference between 2 photos. We have at the left in the 19th and on the right, the actual position. You can see that's already gone. And so maybe we can learn from your experience. Maybe we can make a move to protect our city, or we can make like this brick water, I call it. Okay. But if we make it, we have to put it everywhere, because when we start, in one part we have the accumulation of the sand, but just behind we have the acceleration of the erosion. So maybe we can find another solution without this one. Fortunately for us, we have at this area, about 7 kilometers, we have a natural barrier in the sea, as you can see it. just 500 from the beach, we have this barrier that we can protect. You can see it from the sky that breaks the waves, and it will be good to have this area. Maybe we can accumulate the sand and protect this area. I'm sorry. Okay, this is some other issues that we can find. For example, we found some various invasive species. For now, we are opening this new. Maybe it becomes with it the new species, invasive species like sea hares and the crab or the blue crabs. Some other algae. And now the final decision for specific objectives. Of course, we can implement a scientific and participatory strategy. Of course, identify and map different habitats, model the ecological connection, and integrate environmental and contamination data. But the most important is strengthen territorial governance through decision-maker tools, and civilian society engagement, and finally, education and awareness from the school to the university. And I finish with this image that normally we need to go to the sustainability, but it's very hard to find this point equilibrage between the three poles. And thank you for your attention.
Grazie, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is what Professor Brunetta said concerning the lagoon, which are ephemeral, and also the different lagoons presently are different one from the other. This does not mean that the scientists cannot look at the main feature of all of them. We have a network since many years, which name is Eurolag, which put together the different European lagoons, and we are including also the laguna of the southern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. So in order to make an exchange of experiences, because you saw how different is the laguna of Nador from the laguna of Venice, so the changing times, they have only one small inlet, we have three, so we have a lot of tide. In Morocco there is not so much tide in the Mediterranean Sea. So there are differences, but this not means that it's not possible to compare them. So the scientific effort is still continuing in deepening all these aspects. Now we move to take another example on the Atlantic coast. So we have the city of Aveiro, and I am glad to have here as a representative of this territory. I don't know, I have to look better, and I need also my glasses. To Professor Peter Robeling, is senior researcher at the Department of Environmental and Planning and Center of Environmental Marine Studies of the University of Aveiro since 2008. He holds a PhD in social science and a master degree in agriculture and natural environment, and have more than 25 years experience in the area of sustainable development. So his research is socio-environmental economic, focused on sustainable regional development through, among others, integrated catchment and coastal zone management, sustainable urbanizing landscape, and development and coastal erosion adaptation strategy. It's based in the integrated explorative and predictive approaches that support stakeholders in the identification, development, and implementation of sustainable development strategies. So you are the right person in the right place. Please, Peter.
Thank you, Per Paolo. And also thank you for the invitation to come here, and the pleasure to be here and tell you something about the Rio de Aveiro region in Portugal. So I'm going to talk about several things. So first of all, in general, the global change challenges that we face. Then I'm going to talk specifically about the Rio de Aveiro regions and the challenges that we face. And then looking also at some of the adaptation measures and strategies that we have implemented and we are also foreseeing in the future. And then very important also, I would like to spend a little bit of time on the co-creation pathways to get to these future visions. So first of all, global change. I always like to talk about global change and not necessarily only climate change, because climate change we know by now, but there's many other issues that we are facing and that come together in these coastal areas. So this is really important. In these coastal areas, it's very attractive. Already 50 or 70% of the population, depending on how you measure it, live in coastal areas, and these numbers are only growing. So this is really important, and these people need to be located and housed, and all the infrastructure that comes with it. But also we have economic development, so our needs and aspirations, they increase over time. And also the infrastructure that comes with that, port facilities and other things that we need in order to create that economic development and to feed it, they need to be located somewhere in this coastal landscape. Now, on top of this, recently, I would say recently, as of 2022 in particular, I would say that geopolitical shifts are also very, very important in this global change discussion, because they influence to a large extent to what extent climate change will occur and how populations will grow or migration flows will progress. But also the economic development that we will be able to create under these global political changes. So this is important to take into account in our future projections in order to prepare for the future. Now, in terms of what do these global change challenges mean, so what are the possible implications? So we know about rising sea levels and the extreme rainfall events that we see more and more often, but also the increased storm surge frequencies that are observed. And sorry, I just need to peek here. So what's also important with, in particular with the economic development and the development of local populations and residential populations and port facilities, etc., are two more socioeconomic related implications. So these are related to reduced sediment delivery to the coast. We've already heard this also before, the creation of dams and the reduced sediment supply to the coast, but also all kinds of changes along the coast that are related to these developments. So port facilities, they require breakwaters, coastal villages, they are protected, and all these changes, they interfere in our coastal environment and therefore will have an influence on that coastal environment. So this will have an impact on our capitals. So we have three main groups of capitals that will be affected. Obviously, the first one is obviously the built capital. So our coastal settlements, our port facilities, and all kinds of infrastructures that are affected and that we usually protect. But then there's also a natural capital. So what do we do with our natural resources, our nature and ecosystems and biodiversity that is there? That is also affected by all these pressures and implications. So this is also important to take into account in our thinking. And finally, the human, social, and cultural capital and heritage that these coastal communities and settlements represent. So Venice is obviously a clear example of this, but also all over the place, I would say, in all coastal areas, there are important people, populations living with specific knowledges and cultures and communities and social structures that are affected. So this is a challenge, and these consequences for these three different kinds of capital we need to take into account. And no, it's not moving for some reason. Yes, okay. So now we can respond to these. So we've seen this picture before, so I'm going through a little bit quicker. And so there's three ways in which we can respond, three basic ways, I would say, to these challenges. So we can retreat, so picking up our bags and make our suitcases and move backwards. We can also accommodate, so we try to live with these conditions and adapt to these changes, the rising sea levels or the floods or the swashings or whatever. And finally, we can protect, which is the more traditional kind of approach. I'm from the Netherlands originally, and protection is kind of in the blood, I would almost say. But it's not the only solution. So, because it can be a combination of these solutions that are, could be more or less beneficial, depending on the situation. Now, when talking about these kind of responses, there's different measures that we can take. Well, traditionally, we mostly work with a more hard gray kind of measures, so the dikes and the groins and the dams, etc., and the locks that we construct and manage quite intensively, I would say, in order to manage this, all these challenges and all these threats. But recently, the term nature-based solutions have come into life, and these are essentially kind of measures that build and work with nature to provide not only these kind of protection or adaptation possibilities and functions, but also other ecosystem functions, services, and values. And that's really at the heart, I would say, of nature-based measures and solutions. So they provide multiple functions, services, and values while responding to these sort of issues and challenges. And by providing these multiple functions, services, and values, they also provide multiple benefits. So the primary benefits for which they are created primarily, let's say coastal protection, but also many co-benefits. So these places, these areas we can use for other purposes. We can go perhaps to the beach or to the wetlands, or we create biodiversity. So these are additional values that come for free with these kind of measures. And finally, what's really important with these nature-based solutions is that they also adapt to changing conditions. So when sea levels rise or when weather conditions change, these systems, when they are well designed and with the proper, let's say, vegetation, etc., then they are also very adaptive to new situations. So this is also a really important benefit of these nature-based solutions. Yes. Okay. Now, going to the Rio de Janeiro region, so some characteristics here. So this is basically a satellite image of the area, which measures around 50 by 15 kilometers. And it's essentially a shallow coastal lagoon, quite similar to the Venice lagoon, I would say. And it's also a Natura 2000 area. There's 5 main rivers flowing into this lagoon, so this also means that there's also water coming out that is accumulated into the lagoon area, and there's one single outlet to the ocean. So the coastline, so on the outside, on the western side, we have a coastal sandy dune system, which is highly dynamic, strong morphodynamic, as you can see in the picture below. So on the left-hand side, you see basically the coastline as it was in the 10th century. And with the deforestation in the Iberian Peninsula, basically the amount of sediment that came out of the rivers increased, and therefore lots of sediment came out and was deposited in this intersection between where the rivers come out and where these rivers meet the ocean. So essentially these dunes, they are quite recent, as you can see, at the 17th, 18th century. Yes. Okay, so going to particular challenges here in the Rio de Janeiro region, so coastal erosion and flooding or swashing, these are really major issues. So the picture here on the right-hand side, you can see that the coastline retreat goes up to 8 to 10 meters per year. So this is really quite significant, I would say. And there's many infrastructures, so built capital, but also natural and social capital that is affected. Now, within the lagoon area, there's also fluvial flooding. As I already mentioned, 5 main rivers coming in, and especially when the high tides or spring tides coincide with rainfall events, then we have issues in the lagoon area as well.
And at the same time, so this is the third dimension, I would say, is the urban development and industrial and port development that has happened over these last decades. So as you see, before the revolution, 1975, the area was quite sparsely populated, and over the decades, more and more residential development occurred, industrial development, and also the port facilities on at the main entrance to the ocean. Now, what kind of adaptation measures have we taken so far? So the main, I hope you can see it actually, the main focus was on the protection of coastal villages and port infrastructures through dikes and groins and breakwaters. On top of that, so more recently, we also started using beach nourishment, so artificial sand supplies in front of more vulnerable villages and settlements. And also dune reinforcement is recently used. So these are the kind of measures that we have been working with on the coastline. And in the lagoon area, we have several locks, I hope they can see it as well, surrounding the Aveiro city, and also a dike, so that when we have these flood events, that they don't affect the city center. Yes, and finally, also green and blue spaces in order to take care of the water flows that's coming into the coming through the city. Now, for the future, and if this machine works, yes, several adaptation measures have been envisaged as well. So first of all, locks in the port entrance, so to make sure that when we have these spring tides in combination with the high rainfall events, that we can actually close down the entrance to the ocean in order to reduce the flood risk. So it's quite similar to the MOSE structure, but a bit smaller, I would say. Then we also have artificial reefs that are currently being explored, as well as an option to protect the coastal settlements. And within the coastal lagoon, very important, some nature-based solutions that are being considered and increasingly working with is wetland restoration, because they can reduce the inflow of water and also the effect of flood events, and also the restoration of salt marshes. So salt pans, this is traditionally a salt producing region. And these structures, they have dikes, there's protection measures, there's locks associated with these sort of measures that provide protection, but they also provide many ecosystem services beyond biodiversity. There's strong wildlife in the lagoon area, but there's also many tourism and cultural services that are provided through these salt pans and wetlands. Now, so currently they are kind of blocked off by this highway and dike that protect the city. But if we are able to connect the city again to this natural system, that would create immense opportunities. Yes. But we are here now where we stand with our current situation, our current challenges, and we want to go to the future. So what's important in this process is co-creation and developing these pathways to the future. So the question is, where do we want to go? So, sorry, I just need to go back one. So where do we want to go? Sorry. So where do we want to go? Okay, it's not coming through quite as I expected. In any case, so the question is where there's different futures that we can envisage. And this really depends on, so if we close our eyes and we start dreaming and we look at the future, what is it that we want for our environment, for our coastal lagoon? So this depends on many people and the stakeholders, but we are at a current situation where we see all kinds of hurdles and constraints in order to get to this future. So that's what we need to identify, and then identify also the solutions that we can, measures that we need in order to get to this future, and then also prioritize them in time so that we get to this future in the end. Yes. Okay. Sorry, the presentation is not coming through quite nicely as I had envisaged. Now, in this co-creation process, what's really important is stakeholder engagement. So, why? Because stakeholders know very well what the issues are, where they are. They also know very well what the values are that are of value to them, and therefore to us as a society. And they also have a very good notion of what kind of solutions we can use in order to get to this future. Yes. Now, what's important in this process is informed decision making. So, so based on best available knowledge, data, and information, we can make decisions, and in a transparent way, so that we can assess these multiple impact, cost, and benefits of these different solutions, and also see how these impacts occur, where, when, and to whom. Now, in this participatory planning, what's really important, so that's the next step. So with all this information and with this vision, it's important that we start planning in a participatory way. So include the stakeholders in this discussion on what we want and how how people are and different stakeholders are impacted. So this will create opportunities for people and stakeholders to get together and also define, let's say, business models or institutions to redistribute the benefits when needed. Now, this is really important overall because this basically maximizes or provides the opportunity to maximize the benefits that we can create from these adaptation strategies. Yes. Okay. Now, one final aspect that I want to point out is the governance systems. So governance systems are incredibly important in this entire story because there's many stakeholders and institutions involved in this complex coastal systems. And these stakeholders and institutions are highly integrated in all kinds of plans, programs, and strategies in these coastal areas. But these plans, programs, and strategies, they are not fixed to one place. So we have all kinds of plans. We have plans for coastal areas, we have catchment plans, and we have also Natura 2000 plans and all the municipal plans and, well, you name it. And these plans, these strategies, these programs, they do not overlap. So it's important that the stakeholders and institutions are included, the stakeholders are included and the institutions are designed in such a way that this complexity is considered so that we can actually sustainably manage these coastal systems. So these are just the main points of what I've just discussed. So I'm not going to go through that again. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's very important to see how different the projects are. There are bigger and smaller, but all of them are important and they are corresponding to the need of the different society and different location as well. Now we have here, not here in presence, but here via Zoom, connected with us is Paulino Manuel Lomoine, which is the Provincial Director of Territorial Development and Environment in the province of Inhambane from Mozambique. He completed a master's degree in Geography and Natural Resources Management at the United Methodist University. In 2001, he joined the Forest and Wildlife Inspection Corps, and he eventually led this institution. And in 2025, he assumed the role of Provincial Director of Territorial Development and Environment, overseeing matters related to territorial planning, environmental management, forestry, and land use and exploitation. Again, is the right person to explain to us which is the situation, again, in another lagoon, different on another ocean, in Africa, on the other side, in the Indian Ocean. So, Paulino, if you are connected, hopefully.
Hi, Mr. Pierpaolo. Yes, I'm connected. I would like to say thank you for your invitation first. And also say thanks for this invitation, especially for our province, Yambane.
If you can put in full screen the presentation, please, it's better for us.
I'm not in full screen.
If you put in full screen.
A minute, please. Let me come out first and do it again.
Yeah, we saw you a bit, but now you have to share the presentation. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. We would like to share our experience in Yambane about the territorial management. And to do it, we would like to say first that we are in the south of Mozambique, about 500 kilometers from Maputo city, which is the capital of Mozambique. Our province have got such as like 68,000 square kilometers. Our population is about 1,616,000 people living in Yambane province. As you see, more than half percent of the population, 53.2, are women. And most important for us is that Yambane coastline, it's about 700 kilometers. What it means that it's quite a 25% of Mozambique coastline. As you see in the map, those are the districts that we have in our province. All of them are 14, and our capital is in Yambane. One of the faces of the poverty in Mozambique is a disordered occupation of physical space, especially in rapidly developing urban areas. Happening to this happening. We had at the past 16 years of war, what moved a large portion of the population from the rural areas to the cities and towns. But also we had a rural exodus, which primarily moved young people to the cities and towns in search of employment opportunities and to continue their studies. But also we had the introduction and implementation of various socio-economical development projects. But we had also the problems with the drought on agriculture in the interior of our province, and also the population growth. Those are the reasons why most of our population becomes to the urban areas, principally at the coastline. As you see in the image, where we was talking about the war, for example, this first image on the left side, you see the disorganized occupation of physical space on the coastline. And if you see the image on the right, for example, we can see these communities suffering now from the effects of the sea level rise. At the same area, when we see the past of the same area, we see that it was no population here, and the area was occupied by vegetation. And at this moment, this area is occupied by the population, as you see here. Also, we have a problem on the coastline, as we said. In our country, the tourism are coming very, very fast developing, and the occupation was not looking for the rulers. And this kind of occupation at the coastline comes with its consequence. As you see, all these three images report this occupation and their consequences in the coastline. But in 2024, our governor decided to approve the urbanization policy in order to ensure the guarantee, the promotion of more balanced urbanization and harmonious development of the territory, and to promote socioeconomic development, fostering greater equity, spatial inclusion, and to reduce the spatial inequalities. And we have got here the hierarchical system of territorial planning in Mozambique. We begin with a national territorial plan development. We also have the spatial land use plans to those kind of areas that we can build something, but not a definite constructions. For our level, we've got in provincial territorial, we have got a provincial territorial development plans. To the level of district, we have got a district land use plans, and to autonomous, we have got the urban structures plans and the urbanization plans and detailed plans. Now we are working to implement our provincial territorial plans development, and also we are working with the urban structured plans. In those provincial plans, we've got 6 pillars. The first one is the transportation corridors for goods and people, provide development hubs equipped with public utility service. We've got the second one that is a railway line. This one is a very big challenge for our province. We've got also the tourism development, especially in coastal areas. The fourth one is the establishment of ecological corridors that we are facing also challenges. At the 5, we've got the restoration and protection of mangroves, and the 6th and the last one is the implementation of agroecological, aquaculture, and fish farming projects. For the first pillar, as you see here, we've got so many corridors that are giving us or the population access to the service or to the public service, such as water, as you see on the right image. For the tourism, if you see the first image on the left side, we see the houses in the place that are not moving the part of the forest near the sea. But if you see the second and the third image, you'll see that the constructions was made along the coast, and the level of the sea, if they rising, automatically they have got problems with the sea. When we're talking about the restoration and protection mangrove, we begin with the child, because we understand that if you teach the young people how to protect and how to plant the mangrove, for example, we can have this we see at the last image in the future. And we also involve the figures like a governor to them to understand that if we work with this kind of protection, or if we restore the mangrove, for example, we have got so many benefits in the future. That's why we're working with the child, the person of the government, and also the population to make sure that in the future we can have the mangrove restored. In the implementation of agroecological, aquaculture, and fish farming project, we are also working with the local communities, but we are also working with the people who wants to make this as their business. To the communities, we look for the farmers that can combine the agriculture and also the fish farming projects. We've got so many problems, but we also have a potential identified in territorial occupation. For example, we are in the area that we have got so high climate vulnerability in our province. We have got also the 2/3 of our population living in the coastal zone, and we have got a fragility of most infrastructure in our province. But we've got also the high tourism potential, for example. We have got also a high potential for honey production, and so many potentials that we have got in our province. But we've got also the greater potential for forest resources. We've got a very large forest in our province, but we've got also the existence of 4 areas of conservation of marine, coastal, and terrestrial biodiversity. Let me say that, for example, from these 4 areas, we have got 2 conservation areas that are protecting species such as dugongs, rays, turtles, and so other species in the sea. As you see in this image, for example, we've got here this situation that we was talking about, that we have got a high climate vulnerability in our province. And the second one, we was talking about the fragility of most infrastructures, but also, as we said, we has a high potential for honey production. How to reverse the current scenario of disorderly occupation? We developed it, and now we are trying to implement 10 urban structured plans in equal number of territorial. As you see, we tried to reverse the situation, develop it, and now we are implementing these 10 urban structures plans. But also, we plan it and we design it, help with the university, Eduardo Mondlane University, what we call territorial plan, to put them the plans in the cloud, in order that all the information of occupation must be anyone who wants to see in Yamban, for example, in the future can access to the integrated inclusive territorial system and see which is the situation of the occupation of this territory. And also, we are working with UNISAV, what we call Universidad SAV, and this university are helping us to make a priority projects for the province. And they assist us also with design of the strategic project to boost the local development here in Inhambane province. But while we are doing all this, we would like to achieve the objectives defined in different international and national strategic planning instruments, such as sustainable development goals, the National Development Strategy that began this year and goes until 2044. And also, we've got to achieve the Provincial Territorial Development Plan that began also the last year and goes to until 2044, and the 5-year plan of the Provincial Executive Council of Inhambane that began this year and goes until 2029. We expect that we can reduce environmental degradation resulting from the already orderly occupation of the space. And we also believe that we can be increased in the climate resilience. The challenge that we are facing now, one of them is to enhance the current adaptive capacity of local communities to climate change through the implementation of local climate change adaptation plans, to improve coastal protection, to strengthen local capacity for the development and implementation of territorial planning plans with an emphasis on updating district land use plans, and to make human settlements, villages, and cities climate resilient and safe. And thank you for your attention.
Obrigado. Grazie, obrigado, Paulino. Thank you. Next, I will promise you that this time we will get invitation sooner for having you here in November, next November, when we will have, next October, when we will have the meeting of the project that you are involved in, and the meeting will be in Venice. So we lose the occasion to have you in person, but we are very grateful for your speech that presented something different, with different means. The adaptation is something that must be done with existing means, and this is very important to understand for all of us. I would like to clap again to all our speakers of this session, and I invite them to leave this floor, while I'm inviting here for the conclusion Chiara Cardaci. Chiara Cardaci is a senior DRR expert in the Italian Civil Protection Department under the presidency of the Council of Ministers. Is leading the International Activities and Relationships Office, and she's got over 30 years of experience in technical, scientific, and institutional cooperation at national and international level. She is the Italy National Focal Point for Disaster Risk Reduction and representing the department in the global fora, including those of UNDRR. So I believe that with her background, which is both scientific and political, in interface with the policy at least, it is the right person to try to give a conclusion to this quite interesting round of speakers that we have this morning. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. And first, let me thank the Venice Sustainability Foundation, UNDRR, our valued partner, all the esteemed panelists, and our excellent moderator. Thanks also to Professor Brunetta and Professor Buttafuoco for their inspiring speech. We appreciate it a lot. I have been working, as Pierpaolo said, for Italian civil protection for 25 years. And in my institution, the concrete actions to strengthen climate changing resilience, protect cultural heritage, and foster dialogue between institutions and citizens are a fundamental part of our mission. When Pierpaolo asked me to give these concluding remarks, I don't think that I would need a presentation. But last week, during a Campi Flegrei exercise in Naples, I was accompanying a Saudi delegation, and I saw this. The slide, please. Yes. No, it's okay. Yes. What is this? Maybe some of you already know this. Here we have in the Some Emerged Park of Baia, in the Gulf of Bacoli near Naples. And what we are looking at are mosaics that once decorated the imperial villas built by Roman in the 1st century before Christ. This site where the archaeologists have found mosaic statues, architectural remains, now lies below the sea level because the volcanic phenomenon of bradyseismic. This example shows how, even after 2,000 years, the local community remains deeply connected to its heritage. It continues to shape the local identity and contributes to culture and economic life. The challenge of sea level rise reminds us that protect the cultural heritage is not only about conservation. It is a core element of the resilience of coastal communities. Cultural heritage reinforces identity, support local communities and economy, and after disaster, helps recovery because it protecting, this meaning that protecting is as salvaguarding memory and cohesion of our territory, as Mr. Kishore recalled this morning. This required a coordinated science effort, informed choice and long-term restoration strategy, bringing together land use planning, civil protection, and heritage management in a shared logic of prevention and adaptation. Themes that were clearly illustrated by our panelists this morning. Let me turn to their key message. Of course, it's no easy job. I want to show you my note. So I ask to the speaker comprehension. So we start with the scientific authority, Professor Musco and Professor Arciglia. Professor Musco illustrated how coastal adaptation strategy is the important point for long-term planning. Continuity between sea and land and the importance of maximizing the spatial planning show us that is a very, very important process. He shows some example of Venice Lagoon, Po Delta, Rotterdam and Duck Delta. Adaptation is not only a technical issue, but it implies also social, human and economic changing process. this concept could be as present in more or less all our speakers today. Professor Arcilla remind us that coastal resilience cannot depend on isolated action. We need a coordinated, systematic approach to rethink coastal landscape and their relation with the local community. He told us the example of Ebro area and the new systematic restoration, where this we have a natural-based solution combined with the infrastructure. We have after the Professor Città, and he explained us how Africa have a dual challenges, because they suffer climate changes and also poor energy resource. They need climate-proof planning. They need to increase redundancy and to have a smart network. The key elements to respond as, according to Professor Città, is contextualizing solution, take care of inclusivity, multi-strategy solution, found regulatory tools for climate, and of course collaboration among all stakeholders. We have also another experience from Africa continent with Professor Raoul that presented the experience of Marchica Lagoon as a fragile ecosystem, but also it is also a positive example of integrated coastal management. He told us that in 2008 was a turning point for Marchica Lagoon. They implemented a progress by using a clean up system and improving the water circulation. We have also, as a local experience, we have also Professor Reblin from Portugal and the last speaker from Mozambique, Professor Omoine, right the name? Yeah. Both of all told about different situations. Professor Robin speaks about Ria de Averno Lagoon, where a coastal area that faces systemic climate and demographic and economic pressure in a territory that is already fragile. He suggested the hybrid solution integrated with the traditional and nature-based measuring, as adaptation measured as a dune, beach replenishment, just to avoid the flood of the urban area. Professor Omoine shared their experience in Ibabane province, where we have an area of a region and urban, rapid urban growth, exacerbated by the strong pressure of a local community during the affected also by the war issue. All these interventions remind us that resilience, especially coastal resilience, required a science-based planning, strong governance, and active community participation. These are exactly the principles at the core of Sendai framework. And this is where UNDRR can make a real difference by helping countries bring together knowledge and good practice and supporting them in turning this evidence into effective long-term actions for safer and more resilient coasts. As Mrs. Cano recalled, 10 years after the adoption of a Sendai framework, progress is visible, even if risks and economic losses continue to rise. We still have an opportunity to change this trend, preparing our coastal citizens following the Venice experience for the future with strong cooperation and concrete support to local authorities who play a central role in building resilience. Before closing, allow me to say a few words as senior officer of the Italian Civil Protection. Our department coordinates the national civil protection system and promotes a multi-level approach to territorial protection, combine prevention, preparedness, scientific knowledge, and community participation. Our work is supported by a long-lasting network of research centers and university, regional and local authority, and national ministers. We also maintain a continuous collaboration with international organizations as UNDRR and with the European Commission. Among our activity, I would like to highlight two initiatives closely aligned with today's issue. First, regarding the Africa continent. Since 2021, the Italian government has supported the Africa Multi-Hazard Early Warning and Action System, implemented by UNDRR. The project has been established for operational center and using the integrated risk monitoring and management platform developed by our department together with the Cima Foundation from Savona. Moreover, Italy, throughout our department, has coordinated several projects in Africa, including the recent multi-country study, which reviews disaster risk management in 22 countries across Balkans, Africa, and Middle West. The second point regarding cultural heritage. Since 2029, Civil Protection Department has led the ProCulture initiative co-funded by DG ECO, Europe. Thanks to this initiative, Italy has promoted a common European approach to protect the cultural heritage in emergencies. Building on Italia's experience, ProCulture developed the shared standard skills and guidelines for safeguarding cultural heritage. This work has strengthened technical and operational capabilities across the EU civil protection mechanism and improved cooperation among 37 participant countries, EU institution and national authority. The new phase of ProCulture, that's named the For All, will expand this effort with the involvement of Corilla, reflecting growing attention to complex and vulnerable territories and integrated science, governance, and operational capacity into Europe's resilience framework. As Civil Protection Department, we believe that protecting cultural heritage also meaning protecting people's dignity and lives. This approach, combining prevention and memory, gives a real meaning to this conference, to this event. It reminds us that resilience is not about facing disaster, but also about preserving what we define as our communities. Today's conference has shown that protecting cultural heritage is a key part of risk management. Cities like Venice teach us that resilience comes not only from strong structure, and we have here a very important infrastructure, but also from strong communities, shared memory, and a deep connection between people and their land. Venice has survived for centuries by transforming fragility in strength, a lesson we should share from Venice to the world. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chiara. Thank you, Chiara. So this takes this session to a conclusion. So I will switch again to Italian. Abbiamo iniziato questa mattina dicendo che il Mose era alzato. Adesso posso dire che il Mose si è abbassato. È stato su per circa 3 ore e mezza, no? Quindi solo un breve periodo, però ha permesso a noi di venire qui senza gli stivali, ha permesso quindi la laguna ha ripreso a respirare. Questo è il concetto delle barriere mobili, se vogliamo, esemplificato in questa giornata che ci ha visto stare tranquilli qui, arrivare tranquilli, e la laguna continua adesso, in questo momento, già da un paio d'ore, a comunicare con il mare. Questo è il motivo per cui le barriere del Mose sono mobili. Come diceva bene il professor Brunetta nella sua introduzione, è un'opera che non ha molti paragoni nel mondo di questo tipo, e quindi che noi stiamo sperimentando, è una sperimentazione che facciamo a Venezia, ma la facciamo per tutto il mondo. In realtà, ed è questa l'ultima chiusa questa parentesi, c'è una terza cosa, un piccolo, oltre a quello che andremo a vedere e che è stato annunciato nel padiglione Venezia, nel padiglione Intelligent Venice come chiusura, qui presentiamo anche, chiedo ancora a voi un attimo di pazienza, 15 minuti di pazienza per avere la presentazione di questo quaderno. È la storia della resilienza di Venezia. Il nome è un po' troppo enfatico, ma perché con la parola storia a me fa un po' paura, però abbiamo voluto raccontare in un senso anche cronologico quello che è accaduto negli ultimi 2 secoli a Venezia dal punto di vista delle infrastrutture che hanno portato a dei cambiamenti in città. Quindi il Mose non è solo l'ultimo in ordine di tempo di una storia di interventi che hanno modificato la città. Per questo chiedo a Silvia Oliva, che è la principale autrice di questo piccolo sforzo che ha visto coinvolte anche altri enti e persone, di parlarci, di presentarci. Dopo ne avrete, se siete buoni e state tranquilli, dopo ve ne diamo una copia ciascuno, quindi avete il regalo. Prego Silvia.
Grazie Pierpaolo. Ci è sembrato proprio oggi il momento più adatto per presentare quest'ultima pubblicazione di Venezia Capitale Mondiale della Sostenibilità, perché come anticipava Pierpaolo ci stiamo focalizzando sul percorso di resilienza di una città. Il Presidente Brunetta ci ha detto in anticipo che questa città dall'origine è una città resiliente perché è stata resa abitabile, un luogo impossibile, l'ha citato così espressamente il professor Brunetta. Il tema non è solo aver reso abitabile un territorio impossibile, ma anche aver creato una città unica con una capacità di imprimere un percorso, un'idea anche all'esterno del suo ambito, e quindi da questo punto di vista quando noi pensiamo alla resilienza ci focalizziamo sempre sulla nascita di Venezia, oppure pensiamo ai momenti in cui la Serenissima è intervenuta per salvaguardare la laguna, pensiamo alla diversione dei fiumi che oggi è stata più volte citata. La scelta che abbiamo fatto invece in questo percorso è stato quello di provare a focalizzare l'attenzione sugli ultimi 2 secoli della storia di Venezia, perché questi 2 secoli rappresentano un po' un unico nella storia millenaria di questa città. In primo luogo perché sono i secoli dopo la caduta della Serenissima, quindi in qualche modo le scelte che sono state fatte a Venezia non sono più dipese semplicemente dalla scelta della Repubblica, ma sono state condizionate anche da leggi, eventi, strategie, obiettivi di prima l'impero austriaco, poi lo Stato italiano, il Regno italiano prima e lo Stato italiano poi. Quindi in qualche modo anche le scelte di questa città hanno dovuto adattarsi a delle dinamiche più ampie. Abbiamo poi pensato di focalizzare l'attenzione su questi 2 secoli per cercare di capire come la città si è adattata e si è ripensata in 2 secoli che dal punto di vista tecnologico hanno costituito un cambiamento significativo che ha avuto un impatto in primo luogo sulle modalità con cui si produce la prima, la seconda, la terza, la quarta rivoluzione industriale, ma che ha avuto un'influenza anche sul modo di abitare, e per questo per Venezia è stato particolarmente significativo tutto il tema dell'igiene. In copertina abbiamo messo la costruzione dell'acquedotto, anche far arrivare quindi in centro storico l'acqua per la popolazione, per migliorare anche la sua situazione igienica. Ma anche è stato un periodo in cui è cambiato anche la modalità di trasporto. Pierpaolo ha citato già più volte anche i nuovi collegamenti, le infrastrutture, ma questo ha voluto dire anche un cambiamento nel trasporto da parte delle persone che vivono in questa città. E poi, ultimo tema che ci pare particolarmente significativo quando pensiamo a questi 200 anni, è il fatto che in questi anni si è in qualche modo cristallizzata un'immagine di Venezia immobile, sempre destinata a morire. Per fortuna dopodomani e poi sempre più avanti dopodomani abbiamo visto che il Mose ci ha dato invece ancora decenni davanti in cui cancellare questa immagine, ma è un'immagine che in qualche modo restituisce un senso anche dal punto di vista dell'esperienza turistica. Di questo specifico tema non vi parlo, ma troverete tutte le indicazioni all'interno ad esempio del capitolo curato dal collega Damiano De Marchi sul turismo, che vuole proprio raccontare la storia del turismo di questa città. Oggi non vi parlerò però dello specifico dei temi, dei singoli contenuti, ma provo a raccontarvi qual è la logica con cui abbiamo affrontato questo percorso. Pierpaolo dice che parliamo di storia, ma fa un po' paura perché la storia di Venezia l'hanno raccontata in tanti. Ma qui l'obiettivo è quello di provare a tracciare la vicenda storica che ha portato la nostra città ad essere quella che è oggi, quella che conosciamo oggi, e la nostra scelta è stata quella di fare questo racconto attraverso la messa a disposizione di una serie di eventi, di innovazioni, di soluzioni, di strumenti che la città ha voluto porre in essere come soluzione in alcuni ambiti che per noi sono particolarmente significativi. Ambiti che sono al centro del dibattito cittadino anche oggi, in qualche modo rappresentano anche gli ambiti in cui è attiva la Fondazione per accompagnare una prospettiva futura della città. Questi ambiti li vedete, sono gli ambiti che sono presenti nei diversi capitoli, quindi abbiamo gli interventi sulla laguna, abbiamo il tema delle infrastrutture, il tema del cambiamento economico, il tema del turismo, il tema della salvaguardia ovviamente, ma anche il tema legato alla legge speciale. E poi abbiamo affidato questi temi, che sono stati trattati in modo verticale ma anche in modo diacronico, l'abbiamo affidati a 4 curatori. Pierpaolo non ha bisogno di presentazioni, questa mattina l'abbiamo sentito più volte, e il collega Damiano De Marchi, che vi ho già citato e che è project manager per questo particolare progetto che seguiamo. Abbiamo poi come altro curatore Carlo Urbani, che è curatore dell'Istituto Veneto di Lettere, Scienze e Arti. Ciascuno di loro ha portato il proprio approccio a queste tematiche, a partire anche un po' dalle proprie esperienze, dalle proprie professionalità. Carlo Urbani è uno storico, io e il professor De Marchi siamo degli economisti, Pierpaolo è un ingegnere, quindi ognuno ha portato il suo approccio originale e unico a questo percorso. L'ultimo capitolo, che invece è quello dedicato allo sviluppo di questo scenario obiettivo integrato, l'abbiamo curato direttamente come fondazione ed ha proprio l'obiettivo di provare a tracciare, a partire da questa storia degli ultimi 200 anni, quale può essere una prospettiva futura per questa città. E allora per costruire questo abbiamo cercato di evidenziare quali sono stati gli elementi emersi da questi capitoli che abbiamo trattato attraverso questo percorso, e in particolar modo sono emersi due concetti importanti. In primo luogo che si tratta di una città dinamica. Questa città non ha mai smesso di innovarsi, di cambiare, di affrontare il suo cambiamento, che sia stato sociale, culturale, politico, economico, e l'ha fatto sempre in ognuno di questi ambiti che abbiamo citato, cercando di mettere a fuoco il necessario legame, il destino incrociato di questa città con la sua laguna. Un destino incrociato che non può esulare. La città di Venezia non esula dalla laguna e viceversa, ma come ricorda spesso il professor Costa è anche un rapporto ambiguo perché qualche volta questa laguna ha rischiato di essere una barriera, un muro verso cui la città ha fatto fatica ad espandersi all'esterno. Soprattutto nell'epoca più recente questa laguna è diventata quasi una barriera che non ha permesso un'espansione naturale, semplice, compresa ad esempio della sua popolazione, fuori specificatamente dall'isola. E l'altro elemento che abbiamo preso in considerazione è il fatto che quando parliamo di salvaguardia non possiamo limitarci a parlare della salvaguardia, per quanto preziosa, del patrimonio culturale di questa città. Oggi è stato citato più volte il fatto che proteggere l'ambiente, proteggere il patrimonio culturale vuol dire anche proteggere la popolazione, vuol dire proteggere le persone, vuol dire proteggere le loro attività economiche, vuol dire proteggere la cultura. Ecco, questo dal nostro punto di vista è un elemento essenziale con cui guardare verso il futuro. È quello che abbiamo fatto attraverso, per esempio, anche questo già citato percorso con l'UNDRR su Venezia città resiliente, e vogliamo continuare ad agire in questa direzione. L'altro elemento utile di questo percorso storico, di questa rilettura storica, è anche l'aver messo in luce in qualche modo gli errori che ci possono essere stati nel corso di questi 200 anni. Una lettura degli errori che vuole essere una capacità di leggere il futuro con la consapevolezza di quello che è stato fatto e con gli errori che eventualmente possono essere stati realizzati. Pensiamo per esempio a quanto è stato importante per lo sviluppo economico di questa città Porto Marghera, ma anche quanto questo abbia creato un danno dal punto di vista ambientale per la laguna di Venezia. Oggi siamo in una logica in cui le opportunità, per esempio dal punto di vista della rigenerazione, dal punto di vista anche dell'innovazione dal punto di vista energetico, permette di immaginare un nuovo destino per Porto Marghera, un destino volto a realizzare quella decarbonizzazione utile a tutto il territorio. Da questo punto di vista, per costruire questo scenario obiettivo di sostenibilità integrata, che è il focus del nostro progetto, ci siamo in primo luogo focalizzati su quale deve essere la dimensione di questo scenario obiettivo di sostenibilità integrata. Il primo elemento è una dimensione di tipo territoriale. Per immaginare un futuro effettivamente sostenibile per la città di Venezia e il suo territorio, bisogna fare riferimento almeno a quest'area funzionale, che è un'area caratterizzata, costituita da 15 comuni più il comune di Venezia, in cui sono presenti più di 1 milione di utenti e che in qualche modo è definita da quei flussi di pendolarismo quotidiano che caratterizzano quest'area. L'altra dimensione che ci sembra fondamentale è quella del tenere insieme, come abbiamo già detto, l'urbs e la civitas. L'urbs e la civitas, ma quale civitas? Da questo punto di vista non basta focalizzarsi su chi abita la città di Venezia, ma bisogna aprire lo sguardo anche alle persone che lavorano, che studiano, che investono in questa città. Anche da questo punto di vista poi avrete occasione di andare a visitare il padiglione, in particolar modo abbiamo un'abside, quello di Venezia della Gente, in cui sono messe a disposizione una serie di numeri da questo punto di vista, un flusso di persone che arriva giornalmente a Venezia in centro storico di 200.000 persone, di cui solo 90.000 sono turisti, e quindi abbiamo una presenza di city user di questa città che deve essere valutata quando noi andiamo a definire un percorso di sostenibilità futura. Altro elemento che dal nostro punto di vista è fondamentale per provare a costruire uno scenario futuro di sostenibilità integrata è farlo attraverso l'utilizzo dei dati, per fare in modo che non siano più le percezioni a guidare la creazione di questo destino futuro di Venezia, le percezioni che spesso non sono sufficienti, che spesso sono distorte. Servono da questo punto di vista dei dati certi, dei dati concreti con cui costruire il futuro. Ed è questo in qualche modo il percorso che accompagna il progetto trasversale di Fondazione Venezia Capitale Mondiale della Sostenibilità, di cui la storia della resilienza è uno dei sottoprogetti. Gli altri due sottoprogetti particolarmente importanti sono quelli legati all'Osservatorio della Sostenibilità. Da questo punto di vista l'idea è quella di creare successivamente una serie di interventi, una serie di approfondimenti su temi specifici che possono essere interessanti per la costruzione di questo scenario. Può essere il dato sul turismo sostenibile, può essere il dato sulla presenza di site user in città. Da questo punto di vista, ad esempio, sul turismo sostenibile avremo prossimamente, il 5 dicembre, una ulteriore conferenza significativa su questo tema, a cui ovviamente invito tutti. E l'ultimo ambito su cui stiamo lavorando e su cui vogliamo impegnarci nei prossimi mesi è quello della creazione di un indice di sostenibilità integrata, che tenga insieme tutti i diversi ambiti che abbiamo detto, quindi il tema dell'inclusione sociale, il tema della formazione, il tema dell'economia, il tema della residenza, per costruire un indice che ci permetta di vedere quanto la città è in grado, attraverso gli interventi, attraverso le politiche scelte, attraverso gli investimenti anche dei nostri soci e delle persone che lavorano nella città di Venezia, riusciamo effettivamente a progredire e a migliorare in termini di sostenibilità. Avete la possibilità di prendere una copia, come anticipato da Pierpaolo, di questo studio al desk. Questa volta è solo in italiano, ma prossimamente lo renderemo disponibile anche in inglese, e vi ringrazio per l'attenzione.
Grazie Silvia, grazie. Ti ho presentata molto rapidamente, ma si è presentata da sola perché è stata molto brava anche. Aiuto. Pronto? Avevo staccato il microfono. Allora, con questo intervento concludiamo questa mattina. Ricordo a voi che non finisce qui, perché abbiamo anche il pomeriggio e la possibilità di visitare il padiglione Intelligent Venice per ognuno di voi. Cioè noi adesso andremo al pranzo, usciamo da qui e giriamo l'angolo e entriamo dentro l'ingresso principale del circolo ufficiali, che gentilmente hanno concesso, grazie all'ammiraglio, la loro sede per avere un light lunch, come si dice, a buffet un po' rapido, in modo da essere alle 14:30 all'attesa dell'isolotto all'Arsenale. Per entrare alla Biennale, scusate, all'ingresso che è qui in Campo della Tana, che è un poco più avanti, correndo parallelamente all'entrata di questo teatro, e si entra all'Arsenale. Ci sarà una persona che vi darà, una persona della staff di VSF che vi darà un badge per entrare, perché bisogna strisciare questo badge per entrare ciascuno di voi, e quindi una volta che entrati si ha la possibilità di visitare tutta la Biennale, la parte Arsenale. Però noi andremo direttamente al nostro padiglione, che è verso la Darsena Grande, cioè possiamo correre parallelamente alle corderie, non è necessario entrare dentro, e ci troviamo alle 14:30, puntuali possibilmente, dentro il padiglione, dove faremo una piccola, non una cerimonia vera e propria, ma un piccolo ricordo, un ringraziamento per quelli che sono stati. Ci saranno degli interventi che spiegheranno più focalizzati su quello che abbiamo fatto in questa bella e grande esperienza che abbiamo fatto al padiglione Intelligent Venice. Quindi vi auguro buon pranzo, appena ci sono dei bagni qua sulla nostra sinistra, eppure ci sono anche i bagni dentro al caso. Grazie.